I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues live show. Please pay attention to the warning graphic. It states that the Retro Rogues live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. Again, I want to welcome to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. I am one of your hosts. Nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that some people have heard of, such things as Justice League of America, Batman Incorporated, Grifter, Flashpoint, Wonder Woman. But enough about that. And I welcome back, obviously, my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks, hopefully watching or listening at home, some of the fun things that you have worked on as a creative professional.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. That's Bass God like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of Retro Rogues Live. I'm also the chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions. And I was also one of the camera operators for the behind-the-scenes crew for the proof of concept film Stitched, which was actually directed by comic book writer Garth Ennis. And that's going to be kind of relevant for one of our topics later today, because I do have some experience doing behind-the-scenes camera work.
Very cool. So usually we do at the top of the show, we start off with kind of some house cleaning kind of business, just kind of things that are going on here at Retro Rogues that people may or may not be too terribly familiar with. I do have some kind of exciting, interesting stuff here. So I have here in my formerly graphite stained fingers, this is a proof copy of the Retro Rogues Fanzine. So this is not intended for circulation. This is only for my purposes because we're going through a final proofread of the Retro Rogues Fanzine. Give you just a little bit of a taste of some of the things that are inside. I'm not gonna give away everything here, but just so you all can get a sense of, we'd shown this on the show previously. Again, this is a digital first publication, but anyhow, this is basically in my hands. We are in the process of proofreading it. And getting ready to make the digital version available to everyone. Now, for those of you that are terribly interested in getting an actual physical print copy of this, Eric and I were talking about this actually before we went live tonight. If you want to get a copy of this, please send us just a private message. Send it to either me or Eric. It doesn't matter where you do it. You could do it through the website. You could do it through Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Just send us a message. Let us know that you're interested in getting a copy of this, and we'll take a look at the possibility of putting a print run together for this magazine. It's basically 28 pages. It ranges from profiles, like the profile of PJ from Orville Nation, to some very interesting comic book specific content, such as the feature story on Moon Knight, and it gets pretty in depth. For those of you that are interested in this. So it's all fan generated. It was basically done just for love of the various fandoms. So if you are curious and interested in possibly getting a print copy of this. Again, the digital copy is not going to cost you anything, okay? But if you want to get an actual physical print copy, Eric and I did discuss it, and we're looking at maybe getting some numbers together and possibly looking at putting together a small print run. It'll be very small, very limited, and we'll see. I'm very, very excited for this. A lot of work has gone into this publication. I'm really hoping that people are going to like it. I have sent some preview versions out via email to the various contributors who actually worked on this particular publication for them to take a look and see how it's been employed and the design work and what we're doing with it. And the overall reaction generally across the board is everyone's very excited and everyone likes what they've seen so far. So if things go well, and this has been a massive heavy project for me. So it's part of the reason I've been a little light on my pop culture and my streaming wars, is because I've been trying to focus on getting this put together, in amidst doing other kind of side projects here and there through my freelancing, and obviously I've got a day job too, so I got a lot going on. But I am seriously hoping that we will be looking at making this available by the next show. I think we're pretty much there. There's just one last item to put together. A cartoonist friend of mine saw a print copy of this and decided that he wanted to contribute a cartoon for it. So literally a new cartoon is being put together and being sent to me as we're speaking right now for inclusion. So and then after we get this first one out and we roll this out, I will be basically asking for, if people are curious, submissions for possible inclusion in the publication moving forward, for people who are interested in writing about their fandom or the things that they love, and actually including it in this digital the Retro Rogues Fanzine moving forward. Some more information about that as we get there.
What would be nice, Dave, and something that we can kind of put out there right now, is it would be nice to have a viewer column. You know what I mean? A column that is specifically meant for our viewers. So like Dave was saying, any of your specific fandoms, whether you're into film, whether you're into comics, you're into collecting, any of your fandom, if you guys want to write about that and be featured as sort of a viewer, one of our viewers, one of our fans, you know what I mean? Sort of a fan forum, if you will, we could have an article about you. I think that would be awesome to spotlight one of our, one or more of our viewers and, what they're into. So I definitely want to put that out there.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I would totally be down for that. Because, the more sort of like, sort of comics history essay type things, I wrote 2 of those. Ed Harris wrote a really, really interesting one. This one's pretty good, y'all. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Ed wrote a really interesting one on you should be collecting comic book art. It's really in depth. It's pretty intense and it's cool. And has some really kind of cool art included with his story. So I would be totally down to include obviously reader submissions and stuff, and having a Retro Rogues Gallery feature, or meet one of the Rogues Gallery or whatever we decide to call it. I'd love to do that. That would be awesome. We could totally do that for sure. Because PJ's is very much sort of a content creator spotlight or feature. Benjamin Glenn Dennings is very much an artist spotlight feature. I'm in the process of trying to actually I've got some high hopes, y'all. I know who I want for that second one. It's someone who I kind of know professionally, but I don't know that well. I sent him a message actually via LinkedIn, and I'm hoping he's down to do this, because it'd be really cool. It's someone whose work I've loved for a very, very long time, and it's someone who you never hear much about. And he's done some incredible work that I personally love. So if he gets back to me and if things work out, hopefully I'll be able to announce that pretty soon. But we've also lined up some other people for the next edition already. Very excited for that one. Our main focus for a lot of the sort of article portion of it is actually going to be Miracle Man. It's one of my personal favorites. So I'm going to be writing a couple of pieces specifically about Miracle Man. And I can tell you that right now for sure. But no, this thing's really cool. I'm very excited about it. And I hope that hopefully watching and listening are going to be excited about it too. It's definitely a labor of love. Here's the best part, y'all. No advertising anywhere in this thing. None whatsoever. It's just people talking about stuff they love. It's a lot of me talking about stuff I love, because unfortunately I had a little bit more room to fill than I expected as I started getting things in from other people. And I was like, oh, I got to add an extra page. I got to add an extra page. So anyhow, it's been a little nuts. But we're pretty much there. So my hope is by next Wednesday, maybe in advance of next Wednesday, people will be able to actually get the digital version. You'll be able to read it, check it out, and see what it is that we've been working on.
And I just want to put it out there to everybody. It's looking awesome. I get the updates constantly from Dave. It's really coming together very, very well. As we discussed, we're probably going to be looking at some sort of a limited print run, probably more of a promotional kind of thing. Hopefully when events start going on again, maybe we'll have these at events, things like that. So, because it's really looking good. It's really looking good, and it deserves to have something like that. And we've already got some good comments here. Bobby Chambers says that's awesome. Josh Posse says freezing that screen so I can get a sneak peek. That's awesome. That's exactly what we want to hear. Jane says she wants both, so she's already saying she wants both. Of course, you're going to get both. Of course. Bobby says he can't wait to read the original art section. He can't wait to read the original art section.
It's really good. And one of the cool things is everyone's heard me talk about my mom, and my mom actually did contribute if you can see that, she actually did contribute a cartoon for the first edition there. So it's the child using his Jedi powers to summon some TP. So there you go.
That's very cool. And actually, she was just asking fan art too. Fan art. I think that's a good idea. Some fan art would be really a good contribution, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and the goal of this is to make it a fanzine, as long as it is positive in terms of talking about, drawing about, creating a cartoon about something you love. You can still have a little fun with it, but the goal is it's a fanzine. So we want to celebrate the things that we love, the things that we enjoy. There's a lengthy article in here about my X-Men Funko Pops. I mean, literally, there's a lengthy article about these guys because I love these little X-Men Funko Pops so much because I think they're so cool. This is the Cyclops one, by the way. I thought maybe the next couple of issues I would feature them. The thing I was most shocked at is that they're actual bobbleheads. I didn't realize they were bobbleheads because my Batmans are not bobbleheads. They're just solid. They don't move, but this is actually a bobblehead, which I was kind of surprised at. But it's not just about them, but it talks about my love of the X-Men and where it started and why I found these particular pops so fascinating for me personally as a collector and as a fan. And I actually talk about the comic book series and talk about how it was introduced actually to the X-Men as a whole. And a lot of this is recommendations for things that, for example, like if you read the article and you're curious about one of these comics I'm talking about, except for the Moon Knight section, most of these comics can be gotten or purchased relatively cheaply. And they're really fun, great reads, especially if you're a diehard Marvel fan. I have a huge write-up, and basically, for me anyway, the Bible of the Marvel Comics timeline is in here. So I think I think most people are really going to enjoy this. But it has a lot of comics content, a little bit of TV and movie content, some topical stuff, some evergreen that's going to be around forever. For those people excited about Moon Knight, we don't have Wizard Magazine anymore to give us that really great, interesting, in-depth, retrospective kind of cool thing about Moon Knight and give us some reading. Well, I did that in here. You don't need to fear that Wizard Magazine doesn't exist anymore because I put that Moon Knight write-up that you would have gotten in Wizard Magazine. It's in here. So very excited about that. And again, thanks to our contributors. Thank you to PJ and Benjamin Glendenning for agreeing to be featured. Thanks to my mom for contributing, Ed Harris for contributing. Thank you to there's so many people have been involved in this to help pull this thing together. Thanks to Eric for, getting my emails late at night and listening to my crazy things about what about this and what about that. And so I think it's going to be fun, everybody. I'm really, really very, very excited about it. But we're right at the finish line. And then once we get this one finished, we get it out, we get the look, the style, and everything kind of established. And you'll see how it's a little bit like Starlog and a little bit like Wizard. And once we get the look and everything kind of set and established, it should be because I know it's not going to be too terribly easy, but I'm very excited for the next edition because I know who specifically I'm trying to get for the next issue. The artist spotlight, if I can get who I want, it's going to be really cool. I actually have a gentleman who actually runs a company, and we're going to do an in-depth breakdown and talk a little bit more about sketch cards, for example. Just very excited about this. And I apologize if you hear my dogs barking. Mike is not here right now. We're just going to have to put up with it.
It is what it is. It is
what it is.
Yeah. Jean McCary, she said, hi, Dave.
Oh, hello.
So it's good to see people in the Rogues Gallery commenting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But I'm super jazzed about this thing, y'all. I'm super, super excited about it. I love Starlog. I love Wizard Magazine. I have personally felt a real kind of missing piece. You know, there's a lot of great comics news sites where you can go and get a lot of this information, but there's just something about having it in a magazine format. Even just look, because I read a lot of digital comics. For example, I'm in the process. I was going to talk about this a little bit tonight. We're getting ready to do the Comics Greatest World thing I want to do in the podcast. And then, I'm very excited about that. And there's an interesting sort of little teaser thing about Comics Greatest World and what we're going to be doing there. So, and I've been reading the Dark Horse Heroes actually on Comixology digitally, as I recommended. Hopefully some of you went out there and did that and you downloaded those, because I'm going to be doing a serious deep dive into Dark Horse Comics, X, and Ghost, and really getting all into the Dark Horse Comics Greatest World universe, and talking about the really interesting things that we're trying to do, the things that were successful and worked, and the things that maybe didn't work quite so great. But it's just very excited about that. That's going to be coming to the audio podcast. My hope is this weekend, if things go well, hopefully the first maybe 1 or 2 episodes will be hitting this weekend. So
that's awesome. And remember, everybody, that sort of our central hub is www.davebeatty.com. So for anything Retro Rogues, make sure that you check things out over there at the site. And as Dave mentioned, we're always open to your comments, your suggestions, anything like that. So please feel free to contact us directly. My DMs are always open on Twitter. So I've never closed them. I never will. So if you guys want to reach out, please do so.
You guys can message me on Twitter, Facebook. You can message me through my website. And just so everyone knows, there is an actual functioning RetroRogues.com as well right now. I actually got that finished too. So there's a dedicated page on the Dave Beatty website specifically for the Retro Rogues show. I've got a lot of the live shows. If you missed any of those or you're having a hard time getting to it via YouTube or whatever, there's links to Eric's channel. The videos are right there. We can check them out. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And then there's links to, if you're curious, there's links to the Spotify. There's links to, again, the Facebook page, Eric's Twitter. There's links to basically everything. So if you're wanting to explore more what we're doing in various things, it's all right there. And like I said, I apologize. It looks like I've been slacking a little bit on my end, but that's because I've been trying to get the website portion up. I've been trying to get the magazine finished. And there's, I've got trying to get the audio show going again. So I'm juggling too many things, but weirdly, I'm also kind of at peace when I'm juggling too many things. So a little stressed, but also a little bit happy at the same time. Maybe it's my madness. So, but anyhow, but yeah.
Well, you are an artist, Dave. You are an artist. So what else can I say, man?
That's true. That's true. So for this show, we're going to suspend the sketch card contest for one more show, just because literally I'm having a hard time getting to the post office to get the previous winner's stuff out. So until I get their stuff out, I don't want to put anything else on my plate. I'm trying to track right now. Hopefully packages will be going out this week. Actually, I should be going to the post office tomorrow and getting everything into the mail. And then resuming next week, we start doing the sketch card contest again for people who are commenting. So again, we're going to suspend it for one more episode. My apologies. I'm just trying to do too much, and I got to cut it off somewhere. But enough about that. Do we want to move into our first topic tonight, Eric?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, very cool. All right, everybody. First topic tonight is going to be Disney Gallery, Star Wars, The Mandalorian. So there's been 2 episodes so far. One actually focusing more on the directors, obviously titled Directing. And then the second one focusing on sort of the legacy of Star Wars, obviously titled Legacy. Now, these are sort of behind the scenes featurettes where they're spotlighting the various directors and creators. And they haven't gotten too much into the nitty gritty of how they're actually creating the episodes. I think we're going to see more of that moving forward. But you do see them filming a lot of stuff, which is kind of interesting with that room, this weird room with the giant screen. So they can actually do a lot of, isn't that called, I'm trying to remember, Eric, is it called back projection where they have the thing going behind them?
They haven't talked about that a lot yet, so I'm not exactly sure what the term is. In fact,
yeah.
I guess I should just mention it right off the bat. I'm a little disappointed they haven't been talking about that because I'm very interested in that technology.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the term is because they really haven't talked about that. Like you said, they haven't really got into the technical aspects. The first episode is directing, and the second episode is legacy. They haven't got into a lot of the meat yet, at least the stuff that I'm really interested in. I will mention that there are 3 more episodes that have titles. Like I'm looking at the IMDb right now, and the next episode is going to be cast. So they're going to be obviously talking to the actors more. The next one after that is technology. So hopefully we'll get some more of what you're talking about there, Dave, and the technology. And then there's one on practical. So I assume that's going to be about practical effects. So that's the stuff that I'm really looking forward to. And I guess that's kind of a good segue into my sort of initial impressions of these first 2 episodes is that, I liked them, but I felt they were a little light. What about you, Dave? How did you feel about, just general impressions of these first 2 episodes?
I enjoyed them. I honestly really enjoyed them. I felt like I think I liked the second episode better than the first one, just because I enjoyed hearing Dave Filoni talking about like the time that he spent with George Lucas and talking about specifically Star Wars as George Lucas created it. And how everything's, when you look at Lucas's films, when you talk about the original films, the prequels, and how they connect and kind of sync up, and talking about how a lot of this is influencing the work that they're doing on The Mandalorian. Because I do feel like that The Mandalorian definitely fits within Lucas's Star Wars in my mind. That's just me. That's just my personal opinion. I really do feel like The Mandalorian feels like he lives in that same Star Wars world that I grew up loving and watching. Even though it's not, I mean, it's kind of Boba Fett light, the show is, but I love it. I really, really love The Mandalorian. I think so. Yeah, for me, I think it was the second episode I enjoyed the most. There was some interesting stories in the first one, though. I did enjoy listening to Bryce Dallas Howard talk in the first episode, and she talked specifically about what she was trying to bring to it, because from the technical side and whatever, she was kind of newer to some of this, and talked about how she approached it specifically from the standpoint of performance. And I thought that was really interesting. And in that crazy, crazy story, she talks about being dragged around by her father, who is Ron Howard, who did Backdraft. Backdraft is the main film I think of him for, but he's directed so many movies, it's not even funny. Of course, he also did
Willow?
Solo.
You don't think about Willow?
No, I don't think about Willow.
Wow.
But I love Backdraft.
I love Willow.
So it's interesting her talking about how her father got to a certain point where he would drag her around with things, and she fell asleep in his lap, and that he was having a dinner, that Ron Howard was having a dinner that night with actually George Lucas and Akira Kurosawa. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. So even though she may not be on the technical side, maybe up on a lot of this stuff as much as everyone else, I did find it very interesting that when you think about it, she's probably grown up around this stuff in a context a lot of us may not be familiar.
Oh, of
So
course. Yeah, her childhood must have been really interesting. And that was an interesting story that you're talking
yeah,
about there.
yeah.
Orville Nation is in the house, by the way. He's
Hi,
saying
PJ.
hello. And Mandalorian talk. Yes, we're talking about Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, the first 2 episodes, directing and legacy. And focusing on the first episode, Dave, of directing, I do agree with you. I think legacy is the stronger of the 2 episodes, interestingly enough, even though technically speaking, the directing episode would be more, I guess, like a traditional behind the scenes, because they're talking to the directors about their style and a little about their history, all that kind of stuff. And that gets more into kind of what I guess traditional BTS behind the scenes is, at least in my mind. It usually wouldn't necessarily focus on legacy and story, but I agree with you. I think legacy is the better of the 2 episodes. In fact, I do kind of feel that in the directing episode, there was a little bit too much patting each other on the back, if that makes sense to you. And that was a little off-putting to me. But you know, I don't want to get too I don't want to be too negative about it. I thought it was an interesting episode. It just wasn't the kind of BTS stuff that I enjoy. Like we were talking earlier, I like the technical aspects, things like that. But I did think Legacy was a much stronger episode, specifically because of Filoni. When he was talking about, you talked about it, when he was talking about the story arc of the first 6 movies, the original trilogy and the prequels, which I found it very interesting. He did not include Disney Wars in that discussion. It was all about George Lucas's legacy, and I really like that. Even just talking about right now, it makes me feel really good to see somebody defending George Lucas like that, and the way he encapsulated the entire arc of the first 6 movies. None of the Disney Wars stuff. None of the Disney Wars stuff. He was talking specifically about the original trilogy and the prequels and Anakin's, because I've always thought that myself. At first you think Star Wars is about Luke Skywalker, right? That's because he's like the hero. But with the prequels, you realize the first 6 movies are about Darth Vader. They're about Anakin, right? It changes your entire perspective of those first 6 movies. And Darth Vader's always been my favorite. I've always been a Vader guy. I love Vader. I love Darth Vader. So him talking that way, I thought was really interesting, especially because in the second episode, they do feature Kathleen Kennedy. Not a whole lot, but she's there. And there's some interesting body language going on too between her and Favreau. Did you notice that? Where he's kind of dismissive of her, like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? So let's talk about some cool stuff. You know what? I noticed that. I thought it was very interesting because there's a lot of rumors behind the scenes that those two are really going at it right now for control of Lucasfilm and Star Wars. I don't know if you've heard those rumors. But there's a lot of rumors out there that the two of them do not get along, and that body language, like she was like sitting right next to him, and he like doesn't even look at her. Did you notice that? I mean, I noticed that.
I did, yeah.
I noticed that, and I noticed that Filoni didn't talk anything about Disney Wars. He is a George Lucas loyalist. That's what I took from that. Did you have a take on that?
I mean, I felt the same way. But I think, too, it's kind of unique because Filoni spent a lot of time working with Lucas when they were creating the Clone Wars. And, the Clone Wars is again, this is just my opinion, the Clone Wars is one of the better of some of the newer Star Wars stuff they've done as well. And I would even go so far as to say that, holy cow, this last season episodes with Ahsoka and Maul, man, that stuff's powerful. That's interesting. Because I've seen the last season. I'm now officially caught up with the last season, and even though we're not talking about it on the show here, let me just tell you that if you love Star Wars, I think the Clone Wars is something you should definitely take a look at if you're looking at. Sorry about that. I was coughing. I didn't want anyone else to have to listen to that. But no, the Clone Wars, those last few episodes are absolutely fantastic.
So you recommend them? Because I actually haven't seen them. So you do recommend that? You're talking about the current season on Disney Plus, right, Dave?
Yes, yes. The new season is really, really good. And it's really kind of cool, too, because they actually had Darth Maul, Ray Park, who played Darth Maul in Phantom Menace. Ray actually came back, and I've met Ray on several occasions over the years. I'm a huge Ray Park fan. I don't know if you can tell, but in the studio, I actually have autographed photos that actually hang in the studio, and Ray Park is right over there next to Jeremy Bulloch as Boba Fett. So I'm a
That's awesome.
a huge Maul fan. I'm a huge Boba Fett fan. So all this stuff, I'm a huge Ahsoka fan. I love Ahsoka. I think she's really cool. I just, it's one of those things that I first started watching the Clone Wars. I wasn't too sure about her character, but over time she really won me over. In the fanzine, actually, I actually put these in specifically because of how much I enjoyed the Clone Wars. There's actually some fan art here I did of a female Mandalorian commando, right here that's in the magazine. This has never actually been printed before. So for those of you who collect my art, this will be the first time you can actually get this image actually printed. There's a female Mandalorian commando, and then right there's Ahsoka on the title page. So I loved those episodes. Man, that last one is powerful. If you've been into Clone Wars, that last episode, there's this scene with Vader. Holy cow. Just amazing. So Filoni, in my opinion, he really gets it. And listening to him talk and I had just finished watching the Clone Wars stuff, and then hearing him talk, I was like going, this is the guy. Now I get it. Because I loved a lot of Filoni's work, but I didn't really, I think, get it, because there's a lot of Star Wars fans like Filoni should be kind of like the showrunner for Star Wars, or the person who's kind of keeping up with what they're doing in terms of connecting the world and helping shape the stories, like what Kevin Feige is doing with Marvel. And a lot of people say Dave Filoni should be that guy for Star Wars. And I love what Favreau and Filoni are doing with Mandalorian. And the more I hear them talk, and especially in Legacy, Filoni, man, he won me over big time. I'm down.
That's definitely the high point of the series so far. Just him summing up the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, tying it all together. And it was kind of funny because he's at the directors roundtable and they're just all listening to him. They let him just go off and totally break down the story. And it's kind of interesting because he before this he was an animation director. And sometimes live action directors kind of look down on animation directors. You know what I mean? That there's definitely happens. There's no doubt about it. And so they just sit there kind of in awe of him summing up the story. And again, I just felt like this is a real Lucas, George Lucas loyalist here. You know what I mean? That he's really advocating for Lucas's vision, not Disney Wars. I just thought that was just so pronounced, and it gave me a lot of hope for The Mandalorian going forward. Obviously, there's lots of rumors that a lot of characters from the Clone Wars are going to be featured in the Clone Wars. In fact, that's one of my pop culture articles, a recent announcement, a recent casting announcement. So obviously, he's bringing a lot of those characters to the table. At least that's what we're hearing. So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. It was also interesting. I think it was actually the directing episode. He talked about how he got the job in the first place, because he was into 2D animation and working at Nickelodeon, and he didn't think he would be a good fit for the Clone Wars being 3D at all. Because he was actually, I think, as I understood it, he was kind of like thinking more along the lines of the first Clone Wars cartoon, which was 2D, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I could do that." And then they're like, "But we're not going to do that anymore." Which, by the way, I think that's a very underrated series in and of itself. It's a different take on the Clone Wars, but it establishes, in fact, that's like the first time we see General Grievous is in that version of Clone Wars. And what's kind of nice about that is you can watch that pretty much in just one sitting, easy. I think it's only like an hour and a half of content when it's all put together, because they were minisodes. But it's kind of funny to see him talk about that, because he did come from a 2D animation world with Nickelodeon television animation. And Lucas is like, yeah, we're not going to be doing that. That's not what we're doing. We're going to be doing 3D. He's all like, well, what do you want me for, kind of thing. But he got the job. Lucas liked him when he met him, and and he ended up getting the job. So that's another interesting story, and I believe that is in the first episode in directing when he talks about that.
Yeah, and I can also actually recommend and endorse Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars as well, and that was the original 2D animated cartoons. All that stuff's great. You know, it's one of those things. I don't think initially the Clone Wars really kind of met up with some of our imaginations of what we thought it would be when they first mentioned the Clone Wars. But I've really grown to really, over time, really love a lot of the stuff that they've done that takes place in that era. And I begin to realize how much there is to mine from that era in Star Wars. And it's great, too, because since we have Tartakovsky's version of Clone Wars, and then we have the later 3D animated stuff that Filoni's been working on, it's interesting because they're similar yet different. Right. And they're all really good. That's the thing that's really cool. So I can't recommend all this stuff enough. But bear in mind, I'm one of those people. I love the Star Wars special sequence with Boba Fett, the 2D animated. Like, I'm all about that. Like, that was fun, and I still love that to this day.
Hey, we need the holiday special on Disney Plus remastered. I'm a big advocate of that. We need it. We do have some comments from the Rogues Gallery, and James Stone said he was popping in quick to say hi to you, Retro Fellows. So James, want to acknowledge you and say hello back. And then PJ mentioned. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dave.
I was just gonna say, and thanks again, James, for your contribution to the Retro Rogues Fanzine. People will be seeing that very soon. Very soon.
We definitely appreciate that. Thank you very much. And then PJ, who's also featured in the news, the fanzine, he was talking about my comment earlier. He said, "True. CBS looked down on Seth when he approached them to take charge on Trek. Now they're regretting it." Laugh out loud. True. And of course, PJ is our expert on everything Orville and on Seth MacFarlane. And he's referencing my comment earlier about, yes, unfortunately, there are live action people that look down on animation, and they look down on animation directors, writers, actors. In fact, we talked about that before. Some of the controversy with the Ahsoka casting because they didn't use the voice actor, and I think that part of that is the voice actor bias, that they were just like, nah, we're not going to use the voice actor. We're going to get a Hollywood film actor. Rosario Dawson's the big rumor that she's going to be playing Ahsoka instead of the voice actor who plays
instead of Ashley Eckstein, which I think if Ashley wanted to do it, I honestly think she could do it. I think it'd be kind of cool. I'd like to see her do it. I don't, either way, I'm excited for what they do with Mandalorian season 2, one way or the other. If I was able to have a vote, I would vote to see Ashley do it. Just because she's so closely associated with that character. She loves Star Wars so much. I mean, her universe, which is,
and she's a fan favorite. And she's a fan favorite, like at conventions and things like that. I know that fans really like her. She likes posing. I've seen clips where fans will give her, their lightsabers so she can pose with them. And I think a lot of that was with the idea that, hey, maybe someday she can do the live action version of Ahsoka. You know what I mean? I think that's why fans were advocating for that, taking those pictures, because they're all over the internet where she's posing with these really nice lightsabers. They're not hers. Fans are giving them to her. You know what I mean? And there's some definite controversy there as far as that casting goes, and on both sides.
But I will mention this too. Ashley does have her own set of the Ahsoka lightsabers, because Ahsoka fights with 2 swords.
Oh, she does.
And she does have a set of both of those. They made a presentation of that actually at the last Star Wars Celebration actually, and they brought them out on stage and presented them to her, and she lit them up on stage, and you could totally see her geeking out. That's the thing. She loves this stuff, and if it were up to me, if I get to vote, I would like to see Ashley give it a shot, because I think she could do it really well. Obviously, she's going to know Ahsoka. She's been playing that character now for quite some time, so closely associated with it, and it'd be amazing to be able to make that connection, because it's interesting. Well, we'll say for pop culture, I think I know one of the rumors you're going to be talking about, and it actually dovetails into what we're talking about right now about, let the voice actress play that character. And that's just my opinion. So
Yeah, and the other thing is, one thing that I talk about is, remember, a lot of actors, a lot of directors, writers, they're not fans. They're just not. You know what I mean? So that it's kind of nice when you do have an actor who really seems to be a fan and really into it. Filoni, obviously, and Favre are huge Star Wars fans. You can just tell that, and that comes through in this series, that they are real, and they're Lucas fans. They're not
Yeah.
Disney War fans. You can just tell that. You know what I mean? They're Lucas loyalists. I'm going to start using that term, the Lucas loyalists. That's because that's what I'm really feeling from this, and that's probably the most hopeful thing that I'm getting out of this series so far. Is that idea that these two guys, they really wanted to go back to George Lucas's vision, go back to, bread and butter Star Wars, if you will. The kind of, you think about this series, it's very much what Star Wars comes from with those old like Flash Gordon serials. It's a serialized show, right?
Yeah.
But it's also funny. What I like is, I call The Mandalorian like almost like a hybrid show, because it's both episodic and serialized. In other words, they have self-contained stories with a middle, beginning, and the end, where the story's done. And it doesn't really impact the larger story, which is, of course, the child and Baby Yoda, which is my favorite.
Right.
But
Right.
that's the overarching story. That's the serialized nature of the show. But for instance, like they talked about that heist episode, that one of the directors was talking about that, where he got to write on it as well. Like he was involved in the writing. That's just a self-contained little movie. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with the overarching story. It might come back later this season, but that was a completely self-contained story from, beginning, middle to end. And so I kind of like that hybrid approach, that they're doing, because I think that can work better than, for instance, like with Picard, where it was all serialized, and it just felt like the story took forever to get anywhere. And then at the end of it, I'm just like, what? You know what I mean? Like okay, the
Right.
story's over. Who cares now? Oh, you got the crew together. And I'm like, okay. It just was off-putting to me. I like a self-contained story. I like the old episodic type of shows. Although I also like those big arcs that go through the entire season. So I think The Mandalorian has a unique approach right now in terms of doing that.
No, yeah, and again, like I said, I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see the rest of the Disney Gallery episodes for The Mandalorian 1. Very excited for what they're going to do with season 2. And again, like I said, for those of you that have a Disney Plus subscription, they're interested, I would highly recommend checking out the Clone Wars. A lot of that stuff in that last season is really awesome. I really personally myself thoroughly enjoyed it. So much so, like I said, there's fan art in the fanzine for me, because I had no intention of including any of that stuff in this. And then after watching the Clone Wars, I was like, going, man, that was so good. And I want to have something to represent that. So I included it specifically for that reason. Because seriously, check it out. Check it out. It's really good stuff, I think. And so I guess we'll go ahead and we'll get into our recommendations. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm going to say the Disney Gallery Mandalorian series is worthwhile. One of the things that's nice is if an episode doesn't particularly hook you too much, they're not terribly long.
Right.
So you're not investing
Yeah.
a ton of time into them. But if you've enjoyed The Mandalorian, if you're curious about the craft of directing, for example, if you love Star Wars, I think both of these first 2 episodes are worth giving a view. I think they're interesting, and I think they're worthwhile. I think they're fun. Excited for some of the ones we've got coming up, because I want to see a little bit more of the technical side. I want to see them maybe at least spend a little bit of time, even if they only wax poetic and talk about it in large overarching terms. I want to hear more about this crazy room they got that they're, I think it's called back projection. It's because it's basically like if you saw the old movies back in the days, like we're talking back in the 40s and the 50s, and there's the person driving the car, and in the background, they have basically a film playing. So it looks like they're driving or whatever, but you could tell that.
Although it doesn't really look that way. It usually looks pretty
No.
cheesy. It looks really bad, actually, most of the
And
time.
they did back projection actually too, and I might be using the wrong term, but they used the same technique in the original Battlestar Galactica. There's a lot of fun outtakes because they have these special effects shots that John Dykstra did with the Cylon ships flying in, and the actors are trying to time it, and they've got all these clips of like Dirk Benedict and Richard Hatch, and they're like Apollo, look, and they're trying to look over and like time it, and they can't time it quite right, and then they start laughing because they're having such a hard time doing it because the cuts are so quick, and they're trying. So it's fun and it's kind of neat that we have sort of like a modern version of that idea in the Mandalorian. I think it's really kind of fun and kind of cool. So I'm definitely interested in the technical side, but I think the Mandalorian, this series, the Disney Gallery, is totally worth watching. How do you feel about it, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's like you said. I definitely think the second episode is better than the first one. Although I wouldn't say skip the first episode. I would say still watch it, especially if you are interested in directing and directors and all that kind of stuff. One thing I did feel was that they didn't give enough attention to the director of photography, because I know enough about television production to know that really it's all about the director of photography, because the directors are, they come and go. That's the way television works. They use multiple directors. So that director of photography, who they do have on the episode talking a little bit, he mostly just talks about how great the directors were. Well, it's like, I would like to more talk to him and see what his perspective is, because he has to work with all of them. Really, he's the one that has to maintain that consistent look. A lot of people wonder about that. It's like, how do you keep that consistent look in a television series when you have multiple directors? Well, it usually falls upon the director of photography, folks, the cinematographer, because a lot of times it's the same person, or that he's used on multiple episodes, he or she. And they did have him talk, but mostly just to say how great the directors were. So that kind of stuff is, that's where I said I felt it was a little light, but I would still recommend you watch it. Legacy is worth watching simply for Filoni's, beautiful way of summing up the original trilogy and the prequel films. I think that's worth the price of admission right there. Is just him talking about the legacy of Star Wars and Anakin's journey. He really sums it up. He really defends Episode 1. He really does. He really just defends Episode 1 when he's talking there. And like I said, all the other directors are at the table, and they're all just listening to him. And so I do recommend the series. I mentioned I'm looking forward more to the episodes coming up as they get more technical. The next one's going to be on casting. We'll see how that goes. But as they get into more of the technical aspects, I'm going to be, I think, really more interested in this series. So I'm definitely want to keep watching it. And I do recommend it to those of you that are interested in the filmmaking process, anything like that. I think it's a good watch for you. And I did want to acknowledge Max World Entertainment. Him and PJ have been going back and forth, and PJ's been kind of really talking us up there. And he was mentioning that should be checking out our content, and Max World Entertainment said would very much love to check their stuff out. So we appreciate you being here. I don't know if you're still in the chat, but we appreciate you coming out and checking us out.
And my apologies if I kind of waxed poetic too much and we didn't get those comments quite as timely. That's probably my fault because I was rambling on and on. So again, my apologies. But just very excited. This episode tonight, folks, there's one kind of major downer thing we're going to be getting to here probably in a couple minutes, unfortunately. But hopefully we're going to look at the celebration side more than the downer side on this one item. But I love The Mandalorian. I've just thoroughly loved that show. Huge Boba Fett fan. So getting to see a show like that has been just so much fun. And then, of course, for our retro review, we're talking about Back to the Future, one of my favorite movies of all time. So this episode's full of win-win, folks. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about tonight. And I think most of our viewers have seen all of this. Those of you watching, comment tonight. Come on here and tell us what you think about The Mandalorian. If you've seen some of these episodes, start talking Back to the Future. Tell us what you love about Back to the Future. Let's have a conversation. The whole point here is to build a fun fan community where we can talk about and celebrate the things that we love. And I know there's a lot of love out there for Back to the Future. So I'm hoping people will come on board and definitely chat with us, because I love this movie. There's so much great stuff to talk about tonight. So this is a fun episode, everybody.
I will mention, though, speaking of fun and all that kind of stuff and what people really like, there's really no Baby Yoda in these first two episodes. So I'm really looking forward to when they start really getting into Baby Yoda. I hope they're really going to show us Baby Yoda, the animatronic, the puppet, because I'm really interested in that. I love that kind of stuff. I grew up on Jim Henson and the Muppets, and the original Yoda and all that kind of stuff. So I really want to see Baby Yoda, the real Baby Yoda.
I have a really good feeling that the reason we haven't seen too much of Baby Yoda yet, I bet he's almost an entire episode.
I'm hoping, absolutely. I'm hoping, yeah.
I think they're going to talk about the creation of the character, what inspired it. I think we're going to see the animatronics and how that works in relation to the puppetry. So yeah, I think we're going to get almost a whole episode just about the child. I really do. I really believe
I hope so. I really hope so, because again, I love that kind of stuff, because at first I wasn't even sure whether it was a puppet. I thought it might be CGI, just really, really good CGI. So I'm looking forward to more information about that, and also the technology that you were talking about, because I'm not even sure exactly what scenes they use that in, and that's how good it is. So that's I'm really interested in that, to see which scenes that they were using that back screen you were talking about, and see where it was being used, and really how seamless it is. You know what I mean? Because going back to the old school way where you're talking about driving in the car, those scenes almost always look terrible. I mean, you can just tell they're not driving. They almost always look awful. So it's an interesting update to an old technology, really.
Yeah. And then James actually has a comment here. He talks about that he's loved the series so far, and I would be right there with you, James. I'm really enjoying the Disney Galley, The Mandalorian. A lot of fun. To highly recommend it. And another good one too on Disney Plus that's fun too. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but there's one where there's a guy who collects props, and he's going around collecting props, and they focus in on certain movies that they do. Mary Poppins, Pirates of the Caribbean, they do Tron. The Tron episode was a lot of fun. That one's good too. For some reason, I'm blanking on the name, but that one's really good too. So if you're,
I would also mention the Imagineering. I think it's the first 2 episodes. Basically, when Walt Disney's alive, I mean, that the stuff with Walt Disney and his original Imagineering crew is really good stuff. And they also talk about Walt Disney's brother, which I didn't know a lot about that story, because a lot of people don't realize that Walt Disney founded his company with his brother, and his brother was kind of the financial guy. And when Walt Disney died, he had to take over on the creative side as well. And then he died. It's a really interesting story. Once the Disney brothers are gone, it really does kind of go down. The original Imagineers were amazing, because they basically invented a lot of this technology. So that's another one I would recommend as well.
Yes, very, very cool. There's a lot of fun stuff on Disney Plus. I know we've kind of given them a little bit of a razzing here and there, because we feel like they should have had maybe a little bit more original content on the news side kind of hitting for the streaming. But we've seen a lot of those companies having issues. We look at CBS All Access too. Now that Picard's done, they don't really have anything going on over there either. So we'll have to see maybe as time moves on. The only one who's still got regular content coming out that's really good is Netflix. Netflix seems to still have. My wife and I just finished the 2nd season of Dead to Me. Man, Dead to Me is a good show. Season 1, season 2. Can't recommend that enough. It's good stuff. And then, of course, I love the 3rd season of Ozark. I was making my way through Waco. Extraction with Chris Hemsworth's really good. So the only one I think right now has really got it down, because they got that content. Of course, Eric likes to point out they're going into debt doing it. But Netflix has got that regular content churning, and they've got a lot of good stuff. So.
I agree. Match World Entertainment said, guys, sadly, I must be off. Great stream. Hope to catch you both again next time. Thanks, Max World, for checking us out today over there on YouTube. We really appreciate that. And then Joss was talking about, we were talking about those cheesy car scene. He's like, what, the turning to the passenger and talking for 5 minutes while not looking once at the road? Exactly. That's the kind of stuff they did with the very cheesy, very obvious, that it's a film projection behind them, so yeah, I mean, the things were not done very well.
I know it's cheesy and dated, but a lot of that stuff is very sort of quaint and of the era. But the thing, like I said, that's kind of fun though, is when you look at how much of that has been used over the years. And I just think it's very interesting that they've taken that old technique and given it a modern facelift and a different approach. And they're basically reusing it because they don't just use it for the live action scenes with the actors. They use that same technique because the Raven Crest is actually a lot of times it's an actual physical model, an emotion control, and they're using it with that same giant video wall that they're filming live action actors and people on props. And when they get into that, I think y'all are going to be surprised how much of that is practical and real effects. I was shocked because I've been reading a lot of articles about this before they even announced the show. I'm terribly, terribly interested in it because I have this crazy idea to do something with red skirts. I'm going to talk to Eric about it at some point because I have this crazy idea, but we'll get to that soon enough.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. That does sound like that could be a lot of fun. That could be really interesting. And again, I am looking forward to hopefully them talking about that more in this series, that specific technology.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting. So we're both chiming in. People should definitely check out the Disney Gallery of the Mandalorian.
And we're planning to stick with this, right, Dave? We're going to keep reviewing the episodes as they come out. Is that the plan? Okay, cool.
I would love to. If you're down to do it, I'm totally down to do it. I really, really enjoyed these.
I'm really feeling like not necessarily the casting episode, but after the casting episode, I feel like this is when I'm really going to start getting into it. Where I'm really going to be like, okay, this is cool stuff. So.
Yeah, but see, I'm interested in the casting one too because supposedly I think it's John Wayne's grandson. We covered this previously on an episode. John Wayne's grandson actually stands in for Pedro Pascal for The Mandalorian quite a bit on the show. And I want to see this guy and kind of hear him talk. And I hope they'll get into the legacy of his grandfather just a little bit because that's kind of a fun thing. When you talk about,
do you think they'll emphasize that very much, or do you think they're going to try to keep the myth that Pedro Pascal is doing everything? That's something I'm wondering about too.
If it were me, and that's how I'm looking. You know me. I look at it. I assume everyone's going to do or move somewhat in the way I'm moving. So I think because of the Hollywood legacy of John Wayne, and when you talk about that, the original Star Wars was very much, sort of like had that Western kind of vibe, especially with Han Solo. The Mandalorian definitely has a Western vibe. Whether you want to talk about the incredible musical score or how they portray. There's an episode called The Gunslinger. Let's just call it out. So I think that they'll talk to him and they'll talk about that unique Hollywood legacy and the fact that he is playing the Mandalorian. I think they'll do it a little bit. I don't think they're going to dwell on it too much, but I would love to actually just hear him talk and just for them, because they've acknowledged it in other news articles that have been breaking on the internet. So I don't think it's something that's under the rug. But I do think it'd be kind of cool for them to talk a little bit about it, even if they just talk about him as just sort of like a stand-in and a stunt performer. I just think that's really cool that John Wayne's grandson is kind of, it has a hand in the Mandalorian. It feels like the Duke's legacy is kind of living on a little bit. I think that's kind of fun.
No, I think it's very fun, and I would love to see that. I'm just wondering whether they're going to try to perpetuate the myth that Pedro Pascal is doing everything. That's what I'm kind of curious about. So.
Well, and I don't think it diminishes his contributions too much. And then when you look at Pedro Pascal, he's a really hot actor in Hollywood. He's going to be in the new Wonder Woman 84 movie coming out. I think he's going to be fine. So I don't. We'll have to wait and see. It's always funny.
I'm a big guy in the suit person. I've met Jeremy Bullock. I think he's awesome. He's a very nice person. The fans love him. Okay, he is beloved by the fans, and he's the guy in the suit. David Prowse, he's the guy in the suit. In Star Wars, this is something that we're really into, and we really appreciate, and we want to know who's in the suit. We big thing for me with Hayden Christensen that I'll always defend him because he decided to really become Darth Vader and don the suit, and I will always respect him for that. And George Lucas didn't want to do that. Hayden Christensen fought for that. So I will always respect him for that because that's something big for me as a Star Wars fan. It's a huge thing for me as a Star Wars fan. But in other shows, they definitely don't do that. A lot of times the guy in the suit, you never even know who he or she is. They're just like a stunt person or whatever. It's like the Fall Guy, the unknown stunt man. It's just right. So, that's. Well, I'm just kind of curious how they're gonna how they're gonna handle that. So.
I hope that they will talk about it a bit because again, too, like you said, that's one of the unique things about the legacy of Star Wars, for good or bad sometimes, is the fact that, because there's that what is it, Yes, I Am Your Father documentary about David Prowse, which kind of looks at kind of the dark side of it. So, well, it's funny he played Vader, but anyhow, I don't mean that way, but I'm just saying there is that good and bad aspect of it. But I hope that they will acknowledge that fact, and I hope that they will talk to him a little bit. I'm hoping they will. And again, I'm a huge Jeremy Bulloch fan. I have a signed Jeremy Bulloch Boba Fett picture on the wall. And I got
very
to meet
nice
him.
man. Very nice
Yeah,
man.
he was super.
Yeah, I got to kind of work with him when he appeared at the Phoenix Comic Con. So I got to kind of work with him directly. And he helped me out with the film festival that I was organizing. He actually came on stage to introduce a fan film that he was in. Wow. He was in this very cheesy fan film that some fan in England made. Jerry Bulloch's in it. It was a Star Wars fan film. So we actually had him come up and introduce it and everything like that. He's a very nice man, very cool guy. And Orville Nation, PJ mentions, yes, true. Hayden rocks. Absolutely. Hayden Christensen rocks. So I don't like it when people detract on him, because I think he is I think he did a good job. That's just me.
Yeah. So is that good? Are we good to move on to pop culture?
Yeah, I wanted to acknowledge one more comment from PJ there. He says, I want to have you both together on Orville Nation so we can get the word out about your program. PJ, I think I can speak for Dave. We'd love to do it. It's just a matter of scheduling. We definitely want to do it. I've been on your channel before. Dave's been on your channel before, and I think we would love to go on together. Right, Dave? I think we would love to do that.
Yeah, and I think we've got a fun thing, too, to talk about, because I think people who love Orville Nation, I think that they'll be interested to get, I think, a digital copy of the magazine, since PJ is our big feature content creator. So I think that'll be fun for the people who already love Orville Nation and what PJ's doing over there, to learn a little bit more about PJ himself. So
I have 2 Orville comic books I recently bought and have not read. So maybe that's an idea. If you guys would be interested, maybe we could review those 2 Orville comics that I have, or something like that. That might be an idea too.
Yeah, I'm totally down to. I'm always trying to get more comic book content on the show.
I don't think PJ has talked about the Orville comics that much, so that might be something, PJ, you're interested in as well, because I haven't heard you talk about the comics very much. So that could be fun, So
yeah, I think so. I'd be down for that. There was a recent cover that some people were talking about that's a fun homage to actually a piece that Jerome Moore did years ago, of this really great, beautiful DC Comics Star Trek cover with the Enterprise in the center. You see the crew kind of cascading kind of behind them, and they've got the sort of light kind of streaming effects going off everywhere. It's a really cool cover. They did a version of it actually for the Orville comic series they're doing. I thought it was a fun homage and a really, really nice cover. So
yeah, I'm really curious about these books that I picked up. They're kind of random, because what I did was I bought what was available at my local comic book store, because I was actually Samurai Comics. I was trying to support them because they were closed until Friday. This Friday, shops were allowed to open in Arizona, so they're open again as far as allowing customers to come inside. But while they were closed, they were still had an online presence. They actually one of the few comic book stores locally in the Phoenix metro area that actually even has a website that you can order stuff from, which we kind of talked about that a little bit, I think, like last week off the air, Dave, about some of these comic book shops and the fact that they had no online presence at all. And man, this pandemic must have killed them. You know what I mean? Like literally, it's sorry to say it that way. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, I mean, a lot of these comic book shops were not well equipped to deal with this whole situation.
Yeah, and being a comics retailer has its own challenges too. But yeah, and we did talk about that kind of off camera. And it's, I don't know.
But that's kind of the random nature of the ones that I have. So I have to look at the titles and stuff, because I just took what they had basically. So, right. And then PJ does say, yes, I want to review the comics, Eric. So maybe we can work on that, Dave, with PJ about doing some, because that'd be great too. Because obviously you're a comic, artist professional. So it'd be great to talk about some of the comics for Orville.
It would be fun to do. And then additionally too, we could record the audio for those and actually push those out as audio episodes too. I think all kinds of people would enjoy, hearing us talk about the Orville comics. So yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
I'm down. Yeah, it sounds fun. Cool.
Cool.
All right, are we good to move on to pop culture news?
There we go. Sure.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and set it up, and then if you don't mind, I'll take the lead for our first news article here, our news story, real quick. So, on this segment of the show, we talk about things that are happening, obviously, in the world of pop culture. Obviously, we're talking about pop culture news. Typically, these are stories or things that someone might have told us about, or something we might have read that basically just reflects something interesting that's happening in the world of pop culture. It can reference comics, it can reference movies, TV shows, whatever those things that we love and like, or those things that we find interesting, or things that we think that you, our dear valued viewer, listener, maybe should be aware of. And we highlight those here in this segment called Pop Culture News. So for our first story this evening, got some sad news here. Marty Pasco has passed away. I met Marty many, many years ago at a convention. Was a really, really super nice guy. Marty's work in comics is extensive. We're talking about Action Comics, Superman, Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing. The big one for me is Dr. Fate. That's why Dr. Fate is highlighted here in the tribute graphic for Marty Pasco. But in addition to that, you see some of the other things that he's worked on. That includes things such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He worked on, this is a big one for you, Eric. He actually worked on G.I. Joe, Real American Hero. Worked on My Little Pony, Exo Squad, Teen Wolf, Berenstain Bears. This guy has worked on all kinds of amazing stuff, and as seen here in the graphic, he did actually work on Buck Rogers, and he also was I can't remember if he was the writer or co-writer, but he was one of the lead writers on Batman Mask of the Phantasm, everyone. I always hold up
very underrated Batman film. Very underrated Batman.
I always hold up Batman Mask of the Phantasm as being probably the best Batman movie.
And I own it. That's always high praise for me because I do not have a large DVD or Blu-ray collection, and I do own Mask of the Phantasm. It's kind of funny because Dave and I were talking about this off the air, and I did initially recognize Marty Pasco's name. As I'm thinking about it more, I'm like, yeah, I think I've heard the name before, but the work. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with the work. Buck Rogers, the Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, these are huge properties. So this is a real loss, I think.
It is. He also worked on just the Batman the Animated Series as well. I mean, this guy, and then his comics work is just crazy. How much amazing stuff that he's worked on. I can't tell you how many things of his that he's worked on I've watched or that I've actually read. And I remember meeting him as a bit of a fanboy kind of thing. It's just like, but no, yeah, I mean, his work is just legendary. I mean, he worked on so many different things. But again, I highlighted the big ones, for me personally, the original Turtles, Buck Rogers, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, and a big one is Dr. Fate. I think most people know I'm a huge, huge Dr. Fate fan. I've loved that character since I first got the little superpowers figure when I was a kid. Dr. Fate is always been a dream character of mine to get to work on, and it's one of the few characters I haven't had the opportunity to work on. But we just want to say rest in peace, Marty Pasco. Our condolences, obviously, to his family and friends. Again, legendary creator. So PJ for Orville Nation says rest in peace, Marty. So if you don't mind, Eric, I'd like to just take a minute here for us, a moment of silence for Marty Pasco.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for that, and let's get on with the show. So tell me, Eric, what do you have first up here for pop culture news.
Well, there is a Mandalorian cast announcement that I think a lot of people are going to be interested in. This is an article from slashfilm.com, and it says exclusive: The Mandalorian season 2 recruits Katie Sackhoff to play Bo Katan in live action. Now, I'm not very familiar with this character because this is a Clone Wars character, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Bo Katan. Because I'm not a big Clone Wars person. I actually saw the movie in the theater and I actually liked it. I'm actually one of the few advocates of the Clone Wars film, the actual feature film that was put in theaters, which was like the pilot for the Clone Wars series. But I haven't watched a lot of Clone Wars, to be honest with you. So I'm not very familiar with this character, but boy, she does kind of look like her, doesn't she? At least in this picture, you know.
And Katie Sackhoff actually does the voice for the character as well. So this kind of plays back into what I was talking about, that I talked about. We're going to get to a news item where we're going to talk about where they actually take the voice actress and turn on and have the voice actress has the opportunity to actually play the live action character. Well,
this kind of gets into the meat of the controversy I was talking about earlier, because obviously Katie Sackhoff is known as a live action actor, even though she obviously does voiceover work. And I know that there's a lot of voiceover actors that they don't like that because they feel like, okay, we're already typecast, right? And we can only get the voice actor work, because that seems to happen quite a bit. I'll look at the IMDb's for a lot of these voice actors, and they'll start out doing live action, and then all of a sudden they get into voice acting, and that's all there is. Like, that's all they do, you know what I mean? Because they get typecast. And it's interesting with Katie here. Because obviously she is known for live action. She's known for Battlestar Galactica, obviously. That was her big breakthrough role. We did talk about the first episode of Battlestar Galactica, the Ron Moore version, in a previous episode for anybody who's interested in that, by the way. But she's one of those kind of established live action actors who also does animation. I think she does some video games as well and things like that. But it's kind of interesting because it does kind of get right into the controversy of how quote unquote live action actors are treated versus voice actors. You know what I mean?
Yes, it does. It does. And she's obviously a great choice to play this character, not only because she did the voice, but because she has the acting chops to pull it off. I think we're going to get some in-depth in Mandalorian season 2. They're going to try and connect the dots and tell us how it is that the Moff, I think that's the character. I can't remember his name right now. The Imperial commander in the last 2 episodes. I think they're going to give us
Moff Gideon. You're talking about Moff Gideon?
Yeah. I think they're going to give us the background on how he came to have possession of the Darksaber, which he uses to cut his way out of the TIE fighter. Because the Darksaber, according to legend and lore, is actually the only lightsaber to actually have been used by the only Mandalorian Jedi. There was only one, and basically the Darksaber was his sword, and so it's kind of passed amongst the leaders of the Mandalorians. So that's kind of a big deal how did he come into possession of that saber? Because having watched the last,
we assume, I assume it's the purge that they talk about, that basically Mandalore was invaded by the Empire and severely punished. Kind of a similar situation, I guess, that what happened with the Wookiee planet. There's always that lore that we saw that also in Revenge of the Sith, Kashyyyk was invaded because, and it seems in large part they were punished because they helped Yoda escape. There's that implication as well. So something similar, I think, happened on Mandalore. Obviously, that they were severely punished and invaded by the Empire. So that would be my guess as far as how he got the sword.
Well, there is the Siege of Mandalore, and we do see the Darksaber in Rebels. So that's sort of the thing. I think we're going to get the backstory, and we're going to connect the dots, and we're going to learn how it is that Moff Gideon actually has possession of the Darksaber. So I'm very curious about that for sure.
And I was just going to say, Bobby mentioned that he does think this is great casting. I think obviously this is the best of both worlds, right? I mean, obviously, because we talked about before, one of the voice actors that's apparently not doing the live action version, but this one is, you know, so that, I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer, I think, right?
Yes. Yes. No, yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think this is great casting. I like Katie Sackhoff anyway, so I think it'd be fun to see her in The Mandalorian. And there's a lot of interesting, exciting news coming out, the casting and people supposedly coming back for The Mandalorian. So I don't know if you have any other news articles about that, but of course,
well, I have a Katie story, which I think I did mention on our Battlestar Galactica episode when we talked about the first episode, the miniseries. I don't remember if I talked about it on air or if I talked to you about it off the air, but I was at San Diego Comic-Con in the Pro Lounge. This is basically the San Diego Comic-Con right before the miniseries came out. And Ron D. Moore was there with Katie Sackhoff, and she was an unknown. And Ron D. Moore wasn't well known as far as his name was well known, but you know, he's a writer, and so a lot of people didn't recognize his face. So he was like, they were just sitting there in the corner, along with the actress who played the blonde Cylon. The two of them were with him, and of course, Ron D. Moore stuck out because he's got these two beautiful women sitting with him. You know what I mean? And then there were some people interviewing him because it was easier to interview him in the Pro Lounge than like out in the hallway. San Diego Comic-Con. And I've always thought, because I didn't recognize him, I was like, I wonder who they are and what's going on and blah blah blah. And I bet I totally could have got to like talk to her because she wasn't famous yet. You know what I mean? Like, because she wasn't really a known at all at that point. And I always regret that I didn't go over and start talking to them, especially Ron D. Moore, because Ron D. Moore is kind of a hero in my mind as far as screenwriting and all that stuff. He's one of those guys I kind of aspire to be like, And so I didn't recognize any of them. I didn't know who they were. There was just some commotion going on, and I didn't get to go over and talk to her. So it would have been neat to meet her before she was famous,
No, yeah, for sure. But no, like I said, I think that's great casting too, and I'm excited about it. It sounds really cool. I was just going to mention there's a lot of talk about Tammin Morrison actually coming back as Boba Fett.
Right. I saw an article about that as well, and I was that still seems a little bit preliminary to me. And one thing I'm also wondering about is if they're going to try to do anything with Jeremy Bulloch. You know what I mean? Because that would be kind of neat too. You know what I mean? Even if it's just even if it's a different character, I would like it if they did something. I don't know how his health is or anything like that right now, but I did hear about that with Boba Fett, and obviously there's a lot of rumors right now that Boba Fett is going to be in The Mandalorian. That indeed that scene of is from the Gunslinger, right? From the Gunslinger at the end, where that mysterious figure comes up and looks at the body of that dead assassin. A lot of people thought that was Boba Fett, and that's kind of what we're hearing, right? That's what we're hearing right now, that that was Boba Fett, and Boba Fett's going to be in it, that's huge for me. That's huge for me. I want Boba Fett in this show. I think it should have been the Boba Fett show to begin with. That's just my opinion. It's always been, I've been consistent on that, but he definitely, to me, needs to be in it. I just think he needs to be in it.
Yeah, I think it would be fun to acknowledge him. I mean, but by the same point, too, I enjoy The Mandalorian enough that they were just going to leave Boba Fett out of it. I'm fine with that, too. But I do think most people that are watching The Mandalorian are curious to see how is it or is it not connected to Boba Fett? Because we wouldn't have The Mandalorian were it not for Boba Fett and the mystery, kind of surrounding Boba and everything that comes from that character. I can't tell you how many comic books and how many Star Wars novels I've read just because it had Boba Fett in it. I mean, I used to have a pretty massive collection of actually Boba Fett figures, tall ones and small ones and whatever. So I'm a huge Boba Fett fan. And so if they decide to bring him in, I'm totally excited. I'm jazzed. I'm just like other fans too. I'm curious, is there a connection? What is the connection, between
there has to be. There has to be. I mean, they have to acknowledge that. And like I say they have to. I feel very strongly that they have to acknowledge that, because this show would not exist if not for Boba Fett. That's just the bottom line. Boba Fett's mystery, the armor, all that kind of stuff. It's iconic. he is the original Mandalorian as far as, you know, in real life, you know what I mean? As far as the first Mandalorian we ever saw or anything like that. The Mandalorians were always steeped in mystery. I remember people didn't really understand what the Mandalorians were or anything like that, especially for all those years where we didn't have any Star Wars films. There was all this speculation and all that kind of stuff. So I just feel very strongly he needs to be in the show. They need to acknowledge that Boba Fett is the creator of this mythos, you know?
It would be crazy if we get towards the last 2 episodes and if they do it like season 1 and we get towards those last 2 episodes and the person who looks like he's gonna successfully maybe possibly capture the Mandalorian, and it turns out to be Boba Fett. And maybe in this last 2 episodes we get Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian. And it turns out the only person that might be able to even bring the Mandalorian in is Boba Fett. That would be
that's actually the scenario that I was thinking of in my head, was that because of course the obvious question is, why, if that was Boba Fett, why was Boba Fett there? Is he tracking the Mandalorian? Or the other thing I thought was maybe he was tracking the assassin. You know what I mean? So there's different ideas there that they could go with. So I'm excited about that. And PJ asked us a question. He says, Dave and Eric, does it feel to you guys like they were playing it safe in season 1 of The Mandalorian so as not to screw it up? And I do think in some regards, yes, that's my personal opinion. Yes, I do think in some regards they were trying to kind of play it safe, just like you said, PJ, so as not to screw it up. What do you think about that, Dave?
I think that's true, but I think it's just like most shows too. It takes, that first season to kind of work out the kinks and kind of figure how to pull it all together. Anyway, there's a lot of exploring and figuring out, and kind of just getting the tone totally down, getting the style and the feel. There's just a lot of moving parts. So it makes sense to me too that not only were they just playing it safe, but I think too they're playing it safe because they had to really kind of, put in stone what the Mandalorian really is.
Right.
So I do think they were. But when I look at the last 2 episodes were full of a lot of really great stuff. I love those last 2 episodes a lot. And I think the introduction of Moff Gideon and a lot of what they were doing those last few episodes definitely opens it up to explore that kind of corner of the Star Wars universe, obviously a lot more. And I do think they will probably be taking some bigger risks because, it's season 2. They've got to do some things to continue to world build and expand and move beyond the scope of what they've already established. And they have to raise the stakes, And I think with the announcements that we're hearing, whether Tammy Morrison comes back to be Boba Fett or not, we're talking about, Katie Sackhoff basically reprising her character from Clone Wars and Rebels. We're going to have, sounds like a done deal, Ahsoka Tano, in Mandalorian season 2. These are all good things, and some of these might be a mistake too. So I definitely think they're going to be taking some risks with season 2. Like I said, the Clone Wars devotees that love the Clone Wars are diehard, but there's a lot of Star Wars fans that aren't really cool with Clone Wars. So going too deep into Clone Wars runs the risk of alienating them if they don't tell good, compelling stories and if they don't introduce those characters in just the right way. Because there'll be some people that won't go to Clone Wars to learn who Ahsoka is. Right. They're going to have to tell us who Ahsoka is just in the show. So,
I did not understand the significance of the Darksaber at all. I had to go on, Wikipedia?
Yeah.
And I went and read the article about the Darksaber to get myself up to speed because everybody that was trending almost immediately when that episode came out because the Clone Wars fans went insane. I mean, like insane on Twitter. They blew it up about the Darksaber, and I was like, "What's the Darksaber?" You know what I mean? So
because it's a big deal. It's like how in the world does Moff Gideon have the? Because literally when I saw that, my mouth was like on the floor, and I'm like, how does he have the Darksaber? How in the world does he have the Darksaber? And then it opens up this other can of worms. Like, is the Mandalorian going to wind up with the Darksaber? Like, is he going to return the Darksaber to someone else who should be the rightful, possessor? I mean, literally, there could be a couple episodes where the Mandalorian actually goes at Moff Gideon just to get the Darksaber back, to return it, to someone else. And then there's the crazy theory, which is, I think, just my theory, which is why I think it's crazy. What are the chances that eventually the Mandalorian keeps the Darksaber and eventually it becomes the child's lightsaber? What if
that'd be pretty cool? That'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
Ends up being, because they are a clan of two.
He is the Yodalorian, after all.
Yes,
he is the Yodalorian. That's what I call him now. He's the Yodalorian. So he's like, half Jedi, half Mandalorian. Actually, he is a Mandalorian. I mean, they established that he's part of the clan. So the child, Baby Yoda, he is a Mandalorian. So that's kind of an interesting idea, I think you have there, Dave.
So we'll have to see what they do. But that's the thing. They have so much material now, and I'm so jazzed, having just finished this last few episodes of Clone Wars. I'm so jazzed for whatever they're going to do. I think they've got a good group of people together. For example, while the director's episode of The Mandalorian, the Disney Gallery thing, was fun and I liked it, I do feel more comfortable with that team they've assembled, and I'm really excited for what they're going to do. I mean, they didn't need to win me over, but I'm totally in, but they've got a lot of explaining to do. Just Moff Gideon having that Darksaber, that's an awful lot of explaining you got to do. And then they're going, and we're going to bring in Ahsoka Tano. Yeah, we're going to bring back Boba Fett. And it's like, you're going to do what? Like, how in the world are you going to do all that in 10 episodes if you tried to do, so that's what I'm saying. So I agree.
Or 8. Is it going to be 10 or is it going to be 8 again?
I don't know. I think they have to expand it. It's their big hit show on Disney Plus. They have a lack of content. I mean, if it were me, I would go ahead and give them the budget so they could do 2 more episodes and go ahead and just make it 10. That's just me. So if you love The Mandalorian, you love 10 episodes, isn't it a shame I'm not in charge, because you get 10 episodes. But
and as we just talked about Bo Katan, right, with Katie being, she's going to be in it apparently as well.
That is a lot to drop into Mandalorian season 2. So yes, PJ, did they play it safe with season 1? Yes, I'd say they did. I think they kind of had to. Are they going to play it safe with season 2 based on the rumors coming out? Ain't no way in the world they're going to play it safe with season 2. Like I said, these could be genius, great ideas and make everybody's like, oh man, this is so great. Or there could be some horrible mistakes right here. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, and everything doesn't always work. I mean, we were doing our reviews of The Mandalorian, which we reviewed all the episodes for anybody interested in that content. There were some episodes that I wasn't a big fan of. You know what I mean? Like I was pretty about, so I didn't feel it was totally consistent all the way through. But I love Baby Yoda. I am a huge Baby Yoda fan. I'm completely on the Baby Yoda fan train, or as I like to call him, the Yodalorian. So
the Yodalorian, yeah.
I have to get that image that my daughter made of the Yodalorian for me one of these times. We talked about that. I showed it to you.
Yeah, we should feature that on the show for sure. Or we should put it in the fanzine.
Right. Yeah, actually fan art, right? Fan art.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have another one my other daughter made that I remember I showed you of Baby Yoda eating a porg.
Yeah.
Because Baby Yoda eats frogs and stuff, and he's eating a porg.
Yeah. That was a little disturbing. But yes.
Hey, that's the way I am. Remember, I am all about Vader. So,
right.
The dark side. And Jane mentions, I like the scene where the stormtroopers had Baby Yoda and they were trying to shoot an object out of boredom. They kept missing, and one shakes his phaser like it's defective. Yeah, a lot of people like that scene. I thought it was a little. We talked about that in our review. I thought it was a little like too much, like it was a little too zany. But a lot of people love that scene. I mean, Jane, you're not alone. I mean, lots of people love that scene.
Yeah, I really like that scene. I know my wife we actually rewatched that episode like 3 times because we liked that episode so much. And I really enjoy that the banter between the stormtroopers and because that's the thing. They just come across as just like, they're just dudes working for the Empire, man. Got to pay the bills, and I can identify with that.
I just think that the thing about the stormtroopers not being able to hit anything is way overdone. And if you look at the movies and stuff like that, it's way overdone. It's the heroes they can't hit. They kill rebels like the first scene in Star Wars. They kill all those rebels like nothing, almost, you know? Yeah. And so it's one of those things. It's one of those fan quirks that I have that I just think it's overused about, the stormtroopers can't hit anything. They can't hit the heroes because you can never hit the heroes, guys.
Right.
You just can't do that. You know what I mean? So, and PJ likes the Yodelorian, by the way. Josh mentions crunchy frogs, right? Yeah, remember the child's always eating frogs and stuff like that. So,
well, and I'm curious. I hope they show us how they did the scene of him sipping the tea or whatever. I like that.
I do like that scene a lot. That's a good scene.
He's just like over there sipping, just watching.
Yeah. And that was one of the episodes I didn't like that much. If you remember when our review, that was one of the episodes that I was kind of negative about. But I do love that scene where he's, where the two of them are fighting, and we see. I love Baby Yoda. I've said this before. Just make it Baby Yoda. Make it the Yodelorian. You know what I mean? We can kill the Mandalorian off. Make it the Yodelorian. He's just cruising around in space. You know, we could actually make like a little spaceship, like that little pod he's in, but make it a spaceship. And he's just traveling around in that. You know. That's just me. So
we'll see. By the time he starts talking, you might not like him as much. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they. You know what I think would be cool with that is if it was like he could talk the entire time because he is 50 years old and he's just been kind of acting like a baby. I think that would be a neat twist. That's just me. I think that would be interesting, but I don't think they're going to go that route. But I think that would be interesting. That's like, yeah, he could talk the entire time. He knows exactly what's going on, all that stuff. He's just acting like a child, you know? So I think that would be fun.
Yeah, there go my dogs again. Sorry, everyone.
Dave, did you have anything else for pop culture news?
Unfortunately, I don't have anything else. Like I said, I've been so busy with the magazine, the website, and everything else, and getting all that other stuff pulled together. I did that salute to Marty Pasco because I thought that was important when I saw that news broke, and I wanted to take a moment to celebrate his legacy and career. No, unfortunately, that's all I've got. Like I said, I read some things and I was thinking about doing some stuff, but I just didn't have enough time to really properly research them because I like to be pretty up on them when I bring them up on the show, you know, in terms of like, you know what I mean? Just, you know, have had a chance to really, because typically when I bring up a story, I haven't just read one. I look at it from a couple of different angles and then I pick the one that I feel like, you know, is the best. So I spent a lot of time doing my research and I've been too busy doing the other stuff, but no. What else do you have for pop culture, Eric?
This one I thought was relevant for our other main topic tonight, so I wanted to share this with everybody. This is something that a lot of you might be interested in. This is also from slashfilm.com. They do a lot of good work on Slashfilm. I find I get a lot of articles from slashfilm.com. I should give them a little bit more, of a shout out there. So I use them quite a bit. So this is a Back to the Future trilogy cast and filmmakers reunite for Josh Gad's Reunited Apart web series. For people that are not aware, Josh Gad has been doing his own streaming series where he basically is reuniting casts from different properties, different movies, TV shows, and he's reuniting them, you know, online. So they don't actually all physically get together, because obviously that's not feasible right now. But they do these basically just like what Dave and I are doing right now. And they have these shows where he interviews people. And they did one recently for Back to the Future. So I will make sure that I have this article available, as I always do. I always put my articles into the description of the YouTube page so you can find these articles. And it has a link. So you can see here, there's Josh Gad, and then Christopher Lloyd, Michael Fox, Leah Thompson, which, by the way, she looks fantastic, I think, in this picture. I've always had a big crush on her, and I think she looks amazing in this picture. And this is obviously just a screen grab. So for anybody interested, I think they also had the director, some of the writers. I haven't watched it yet, but I think if you're a Back to the Future fan, you're going to be interested in this. So I just wanted to put that out there that recently Josh Gad did this. It's also being done for charity. There's some sort of fundraising aspect to this where they're trying to raise money for charity. It's a good cause. Could see an image here of Christopher Lloyd. He looks pretty good, actually. It's kind of funny. Christopher Lloyd kind of is ageless now at this point, ever since he got beyond Taxi. Obviously, he doesn't have the Taxi look, but he still has the Emmett Brown look. He definitely has the Emmett Brown look. And I'm a big fan of him as well because I think Star Trek 3 is one of the most underrated movies ever made. And of course, he was in that as well. So I think this is a fun thing. Had you heard about this, Dave, that they did this virtual reunion?
I had heard about it, and I had seen that they were doing this, and I thought it looked really cool and interesting. And it's interesting too because Christopher Lloyd actually has a brief segment actually in that. I think it's called Prop Works. I forget what it's called, but the Disney Plus show, because they talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he's actually in that too. And it's always fun seeing him. But no, this is really cool. This is really cool. I think this was really neat that they did this. So. It's
always nice to see Michael J. Fox because Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's, which by the way, my dad has Parkinson's as well. So I kind of always have that little relation there as far as when I see him. I grew up on Family Ties. I was a big Family Ties fan. I loved Alex P. Keaton and all that kind of stuff. I think this would be fun for anybody if you want to check this out. Again, it's not just the cast. I believe the director is involved. Some of the writers, some of the other people are involved. They have all sorts of stories about Back to the Future. And like I said, haven't watched it yet, but I think it might be a lot of fun for folks, especially if you're a diehard Back to the Future fan. And like I said, Leah Thompson looks great. And PJ says, yes, she does. Yes, she does. Seriously, I've always had a big crush on her. And PJ also mentioned, I've been watching The Goonies was good. That was the first episode that he did. He did a Goonies reunion. So that's also, if you're interested in that. And he's been doing quite a few, and I think he plans to do more. So it's just something that I think a lot of our viewers would be interested in.
If they ever did a Red Skirts feature film, I think Leah Thompson, I think she'd be really great to have in a Red Skirts feature film. So.
Oh yeah, I would love to see her in the Red Skirts uniform too. Definitely.
Well, very cool, very cool. Do you have anything else for pop culture tonight?
I think we could move into Streaming Wars. I think we're good to move into Streaming Wars.
All right. Okay. So here on the Streaming Wars segment, we talk about things that are obviously happening in the world of the various streaming services, whether we're talking about Disney Plus, whether we're talking about Hulu or Netflix, or even some of the free services that we've been highlighting during some of our quarantine specials that we've done previously, whether we're talking about, Crackle or kind of blanking at the moment. But anyhow, just on the Streaming Wars segment, we want to talk about how these different services are navigating the streaming wars. Obviously, they're all competing for dollars that are dwindling because the cost of subscribing to a lot of these services can add up pretty quickly. Once you have Amazon Prime and you've got Hulu, and then you're paying for Netflix, and you're paying for Disney Plus, and then you get DC Universe, and what about HBO Max and whatever else, it adds up pretty quick. Trust me, I know because I haven't subscribed to too many of them. But here we talk about, obviously, news items, articles, things of interest are happening in the world of streaming wars. Unfortunately, again, for this episode, my apologies, anyone. I don't have anything for this particular segment tonight just because I've been too busy working on so many other things. But tell me, Eric, what do you have up first, actually, for tonight's segment of the Streaming Wars?
Well, this one's, I think, a big story. This is a big breaking story. This is big in the financial sector right now. In fact, this actually kind of almost affects me as well because I've recently made some stock acquisitions myself that might make me some money. So this is a movieweb.com article. It says Amazon rumored to buy AMC theaters, causing cinema chain stock to surge. And by the way, for people that weren't aware of this, man, AMC's stock was in the toilet. It was low. That's why I ended up buying a share. So I bought a share. I think it was down to like $6 a share or something like that when I bought it. And now I wish I had bought more. I really wish I had bought more when it was at that price. So it says, while neither company is currently acknowledging the speculation, AMC's stock is trading higher today as traders in Wall Street consider that Amazon may still be interested in buying the beleaguered theatrical exhibitor. So this is kind of a rumor, but this is enough of a rumor that people are buying the stock, and AMC's stock, which has been plummeting ever since the pandemic started, is starting to surge. So this is pretty interesting. Had you heard about this, Dave?
I had seen just some recent kind of preliminary, kind of some rumors, I think maybe from, this is from the 11th, I would say a couple days ago, that there had been talk about this. I hadn't bought any AMC stock. I've been making some acquisitions here and there myself during the pandemic.
Do you wish you had now? Do you wish you had now?
I mean, I wish I had, but coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Because it was low, Dave. It was really low. I think it was like $6 when I bought one share. I just decided, oh, what the heck, $6. Even if they go to zero, $6. That's it. So.
Yeah, but I've been doing the same thing. I've been trying to pay attention to things that are happening. My wife and I actually recently, a couple nights ago, we were discussing a few other things we were thinking about doing. So I have been kind of making some moves, and because I've been kind of sitting on getting to the stock market for quite some time. Most of my, actually, just to be candid for just a moment, most of my funds that I should have been saving for my 401k over the years, I've been pouring into all these creative owned ventures. That's where I've been doing. I've been trying to bet on me. Hasn't paid off yet. Just going to put that out there.
But it will. It will, Dave. We know it will. So,
but I've spent a lot of time betting on me, upgrading technology, paying for print runs for books. That's where a lot of mine's gone. And then I had managed to kind of squirrel away and save away some stuff over the last several years. And I'm like, okay, I've got some catching up to do, but I don't need to go crazy. So a percentage of it is in things that are a little bit more secure. But I have been making kind of some mad money purchases here and there. I will tell you, my most recent one I've been looking at is maybe not a smart buy, but I'm thinking of buying a couple stocks for Funko, just because I like these stupid little character guys they make. No reason to do that. They're not really super low. They're not really super high. It doesn't make any sense. I had at one point been thinking about AMC, and then I kind of went, I don't know. And I decided not to. So, I'm kind of missing the boat on this one. But we'll see what happens. I mean, there were those rumors at one point that Apple might actually purchase Disney. There's been all kinds of crazy rumors going on about stuff happening. So,
that's a very strong rumor, by the way. And actually, we talked about it previously when it was like just first a rumor. Like I think months ago, we were talking about that in our streaming wars coverage about the possibility that was when things were really looking bad for Disney at the very beginning of the pandemic. We talked a little bit about that, about the possibility of Apple acquiring Disney. So there's a lot of talk. In fact, the next article I have kind of relates to that as well, with another property. But this is pretty interesting. Again, there's been no confirmation, but there's enough of information out there that people are buying the stock based on this rumor, and the stock price is going up. I didn't check it before the show. I should have, but I know it has gone up substantially. So that seems like it's a pretty solid rumor. You know what I mean? As far as if people are going to start buying it.
And there may be an interesting play here, because if I remember correctly, I think AMC is one of the few cinema chains that tried to have or does have a plan in place, because we talked about this months and months and months ago, that they had something in place where they were going to start doing first run, I think, where you could rent them or view them from your home, that they had some sort of contract with some of their the film production companies that they receive content from. So if Amazon can do this and make this work, and if it is sort of a hybrid sort of a thing that they put in place where through Amazon Prime, they have some of this as part of the AMC brand, but then also too have the live theater going experience, as well as obviously too, I'm assuming as a part of buying out AMC, I'm assuming they would have access to some of their other content that they could use for Amazon Prime as well. They want to talk about, Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. There's a lot of those AMC shows as well as their channel. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with all this. I'm curious to see, where all this eventually ends up.
Yeah, I am too. I really, because obviously there's been a lot of rumors that AMC was done. That there was a lot of rumors. I mean, like I said, their stock price was plummeting quite a bit. That the pandemic was going to wipe them out. And then, of course, we talked about in a previous episode, or that might have been when I did my stream by myself, but I talked about the issue with Universal, because we have talked about Trolls World Tour and the fallout of that entire situation, where AMC was actually saying, we're not going to show Universal movies anymore once we open up again. It really got heated. So we'll see what happens. It would be an interesting move for Amazon to do this and get into the theater game, and start actually becoming an exhibitor. I wanted to acknowledge in the Rogues Gallery, George Peter Gaddis. He says, "Hail all." George Peter Gaddis is a very talented comic book artist himself. I believe he has an Indiegogo going right now for one of his projects, and it looks really cool. So anybody that's interested in that, George Peter Gaddis has some a really cool content that he's creating right now as far as a book. He even has a model of a ship for it and stuff like that. It's like an actual model of the ship that appears in his book, which I think looks really cool. So just want to acknowledge you, George, and thank you for stopping by.
Very cool. Thanks for stopping by. That's for sure. No, it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what actually shakes out from that possible, AMC deal. Like I said, because it'd be interesting too, because if Amazon does buy AMC, it gives AMC the out to where they don't have to hold to that. We're not going to show Universal movies anymore.
Yeah, because Amazon obviously can play nice if they want. So
yeah, it's like
we
just bought them. We're going to show Universal movies, and we'll make them available to see on Amazon Prime too. While we're at, I could see Amazon finding a way to capitalize on the live viewing experience, but also, secondly too, to find a way to capitalize and do something interesting with the home viewing experience as well. So. Be interesting because I'm Amazon Prime guy. I got that too. I don't watch as much content on there as I sometimes think I should. And as a side note, this should have been a pop culture news item. Bobby Chambers actually did send me a link where there is discussion or talk that I think that New Mutants is actually available where you can actually pre-order it so you can watch it at home.
Really?
That did make a lot of noise. There's been some talk about it. It says New Mutants is headed straight to VOD, now available to pre-order on Amazon.
Oh, wow.
I'm bringing it up because I was thinking, I have yet to actually go in and look and see if it's on there, but they're saying it's available to pre-order already. And because this film has suffered so many delays. But yeah, still, as of this article, there's still been no official update. Amazon Prime has now removed the pre-order listing and added the following statement: our agreements with the content provider don't allow purchase of this title at this time. So maybe they jumped the gun, and maybe there is something that'll be coming out later, maybe from Disney proper or their division of Fox that they own or whatever. I still think New Mutants already been
interesting. I wonder why they had that flub. That's kind of interesting. Why they put it out there and then realize, we're not supposed to do that. That's interesting. There's a story there somewhere.
I don't know. Yeah, I have the feeling that maybe that they intended to pull the trigger on that, and then maybe for some reason they decided to pull back. But yeah, Bobby, I did check it out. Of course, I just brought it up here on the show. But yeah, according to Amazon, there's an update, and they've actually pulled that pre-order listing down. And I would bet that too. I would bet that they basically just kind of jumped the gun. So
it's interesting. I wonder why. That's interesting.
I honestly don't think New Mutants is that film they should be sitting on. unless it's really, really friggin' good, and they, you know what I mean, they want it in theaters specifically. But I can't imagine it would be. I mean, I want to see it, and the trailers look interesting, but I can't imagine it's that great. But maybe it's, who knows? No one
Never
knows.
know. Yeah, that's
So,
interesting because I would like to see that as well. And it does, and I agree with you because you've talked about this a lot. That it just seems like kind of a no-brainer to put it out there on one of the streaming platforms. You know, why not put it on Hulu? You know what I mean, or something like that. So I don't quite understand it.
it's the one Marvel production that's connected to Marvel because it's part of the X-Men universe. It's the one Marvel production that they could release right now in the midst of everything that's going on, and it would be no harm, no foul, whether it wins and does well or loses and does poorly. No one would hold it against them. It's the last remnant of the Fox X-Men universe, so they're not beholden to do anything with it. But then,
But if it's successful though, then are they put in a weird situation? Are they put in a weird situation where now it's going to be like, I'm wondering if that's what the issue really is. It's like they're like, well, if it's really successful, are we going to have to go back and try to kind of, you know, restart the Fox X-Men when we really want to put X-Men in the MCU? That's what I'm wondering, if that's part of the problem.
Well, Steve, that's why I just take it. That's why I'm saying you release it right now. You release it right now in the midst of all the chaos. You don't even bother to try and put it out in theaters. You just release it right now. Get it over with. Because if you get it over with now, I think a lot of people would be like, oh, well, that was released during the pandemic. That doesn't count. You know, you wait too much longer. You wait too much longer, and you still have the exact same problem you were talking about because people are going to want to know how it's connected.
Yeah.
You know, so I think the time to release this movie, in all honesty, was probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I think that window is done. So if this isn't like a super great, awesome X-Men movie, they're still going to have the same marketing problems they would have had anyway. They're going to still have the same timeline story confusion problems of how does this fit into the MCU? Doesn't fit into the MCU? Like they're still going to have all the same problems they had before. But literally, they released it 2 or 3 weeks ago. They might have a hit X-Men movie with the New Mutants. People might be celebrating the X-Men films a little bit more, you know what I mean, and kind of revisiting all that universe and maybe kind of saying their goodbyes right now, you know what I mean, to the X-Men universe and preparing to move forward. But you release this too close to Black Widow, you have the same problems of confusion. People are going, how does this fit in? Does this mean the X-Men are part of the same MCU? They're walking right into the trap anyway. Whether they're trying to dodge that bullet or not, they're walking right into it now. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's true. I think that's true. I did have one more article for Streaming Wars. We haven't talked a whole lot about CBS All Access. And what's funny is news outlets don't talk a lot about CBS All Access in the context of the Streaming Wars. They're often very excluded from coverage of the Streaming Wars, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. So this is a Business Wire article. It says CBS All Access adds more than 100 films from Paramount Pictures. New additions to CBS All Access film library include The Godfather trilogy, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and more. And I believe it includes most of the Star Trek feature films as well. Also included here, it says Airplane, First Wives Club, Pretty in Pink, To Catch a Thief. It says yes, and along with additional films in the Star Trek franchise. So I'm not sure if you were aware of this, Dave, if you've been taking advantage of this at all.
I was aware of it. I was actually in the movie library last night or night before last taking a look because I'd heard some talk that they had added a bunch of films in because they didn't have a very super deep roster of films. And I always thought it was weird, too, that you could actually see more of the Star Trek films on Netflix, or you could see actually more of them on Crackle, you know, or you could see more of them on Name Your Service, Amazon Prime, than you actually could on CBS All Access. I thought that was really strange. But they do have more of them added in. There's quite a a lot of great films actually available now on CBS All Access, which is pretty cool. So no, yeah, I'd been kind of poking around, seeing what was in there, and kind of identifying some things that I think I might like to watch. I don't know if we're necessarily going to cover any of those films in a retro review here on the show, but they have added quite a bit of content, and I have been looking at it. So
I did want to acknowledge that Joss is taking off. He says, "Got to go, guys. I have an early conference call tomorrow morning. Thanks for the show. We really appreciate you coming out. You're a very loyal viewer of the show. So, hey, you got to do what you got to do. Remember, you can always watch the repeat, though. And I also, on the YouTube, I will split the show into sections and things like that. But you can always view it again on Facebook. It's always there, the entire show. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much." And
yes, thanks, James. And like I said, the sketch card packages from the previous winners, James is one of those, that should be going out this week. Again, I apologize for the delays. I've just been having some issues getting into the post office with everything that's been going on, but should be going to the post office. If not today, not today. If not tomorrow, it'll definitely be the next day. But I'm pretty sure I'll be hitting the post office tomorrow. So
awesome. Now, one of the other things about this is interesting. There's been a lot of talk of rebranding CBS All Access to basically Viacom CBS. And of course, this seems like it's the first step to do that by including the Paramount content within CBS All Access. They're getting that whole, Viacom and CBS back together, and so there's a lot of talk of rebranding, that they're going to be coming out with an all new version of CBS All Access. It's going to be Viacom CBS. So it's going to have things from, like, say, Nickelodeon, MTV, other content that Viacom owns. So that's kind of also part of this. And I think this is the first step to doing that, is including the Paramount library in the CBS All Access service. What do you think about that, Dave? As far as, have you heard these rumors that they are going to revamp CBS All Access as Viacom CBS to kind of get all that content together?
Yes, I've heard that as well, and that would make sense. It does kind of belittle all the time they've spent branding the CBS All Access, but that's
but I'll mention
sometimes.
But I'll mention, as I said before, the coverage on CBS All Access is pretty weak, in my opinion, because I'm out there always hunting for articles and things like that. And when you see these big streaming wars articles, they hardly ever even talk about CBS. It's like they're not even a factor.
No, yeah, and that's kind of been, that's been kind of like a thing. They haven't really been covered very much, but I think there's so much going on in the world of the streaming wars, to be honest. There's so much to cover, unless you are breaking something truly interesting news-wise. When they had Picard running, they were getting all kinds of coverage, and people talking about things, and people wanted to talk to Patrick Stewart and whoever else. And so they had something kind of, CBS All Access has the same problem I think a lot of the streaming services have at the moment. They just don't have anything, new, interesting, or hitting at the moment to really keep people paying attention. And I brought that up, before. I mean, for example, like the way they were talking before is by the time Picard was going to start kind of getting towards its end, I was thinking that season 3 of Discovery should be hitting, or maybe they would have something happening with Lower Decks. Like one of the other shows would be, ready to roll. And right now, all CBS All Access has going as far as Star Trek goes, it's just, rumors and news items. I don't know if you saw it, but there's I was trying to find it actually on my phone and I can't find it, but there was a news story about one of the actors from The Mandalorian. I don't know if it was the kid who played the gunslinger, but one of the actors in The Mandalorian is actually being eyed to possibly play and I'm not sure this is a good idea. Let me put this out there right now. I don't think this is a good idea. To play a young Jim Kirk in the Pike show that they've been not supposedly doing. That there's
really
some casting.
I hadn't heard that. Wow, I hadn't heard that rumor.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. By the way, I don't think.
I think it's a terrible idea.
Again, and then it gets even more confused because the rumors is right now that the Pike show is tentatively titled Enterprise. It's like, well, you can't call it Enterprise. You've already had a show with Scott Bakula called Enterprise. You can't do that again. And I don't want them to act like Enterprise doesn't count just because someone wants to use the name. Well,
they kind of have acted like Enterprise doesn't count.
But see, it does count. It does count.
But as far as New Trek is concerned, it really doesn't. They've contradicted a lot of things in Enterprise in Discovery.
That's true. I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. But all I'm saying is that as far as new content goes, there's a couple of different shows that are airing on their regular CBS network that you can watch on CBS All Access. You know, my wife watches Survivor. I've been kind of curious about what is it, The Good Life or whatever it's called. There's a couple of different things on there, but they just don't have a lot happening.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so I think part of the reason they're not being reported on is they're not making any real moves. It seems like, you know, I was under the opinion that when they got back together with Viacom that things would start moving forward. But it seems like since they've got back together with Viacom, it's like, okay, what are we going to do? And they're still trying to figure it out because at one point they were touting themselves as like, you know, the Star Trek. Well, they're still doing it right now. They've got those ads running where they're the Star Trek hub. I think Star Trek is their big thing that they're using to bring people in. But I'm just still surprised. It's like they said that we were not going to go through these long droughts between Star Trek shows. I can't remember if they said that at Star Trek Vegas or somewhere. I remember reading an article where they said that they were fixing that problem and they had their pipeline in place. Whereas one show would
they have not fixed that problem.
No,
I think that was the idea with the short treks. The short treks were going to be able to bridge the gap in between shows, and that just hasn't happened. That just has not happened.
There's nothing happening right now. All they have going on the Star Trek side right now since Picard ended is rumors and casting rumors for a show that they haven't even really announced they're really doing. That's what they've got going. So the fact that everyone else isn't reporting on them, I'm not surprised. In addition to them adding to their movie catalog, I did see some reporting about the positive reporting about what they're doing with their live sports. Now I have seen some of that where people are talking about that once the sporting events, you know, start back up again, because they were showing some live sports that a lot of the other services don't really have available. So there's that. There was a lot of touting about that. So I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think CBS All Access isn't getting reported on a lot because they're not doing a lot. I mean, I know they have active shows in production, but those are on regular CBS. And you can also watch them on CBS All Access. It's not like they're original. They had that interview show. I think they were hoping that would break bigger than it did. And my wife and I watched a couple episodes, but it just didn't catch us. It just didn't. I don't know. It just didn't hook us.
I'm not even familiar with what that show is.
I think it's called Interrogation. And it looked interesting.
Oh, yeah. I've seen the previews for that. Yeah.
It looked interesting. And we tried to watch the first couple episodes, and you're supposed to be able to watch it in any order or whatever. I don't know. It just didn't work. For me anyway. So we watched a little bit of it, and then we just never went back to it. I think besides Star Trek, I've watched more Price is Right on CBS All Access.
Price is Right. Hey, that's a good show, man. That's a good show. I watch Price is Right sometimes, but I usually, when I watch it over my antenna. I don't use CBS All Access. In fact, I've mentioned that with Star Trek, I usually watch it on Heroes and Icons over the air on my antenna. I usually don't watch Star Trek on CBS All Access. In fact, other than Picard, I haven't watched any Star Trek on CBS All Access. I am interested in watching some of the movies. I would like to rewatch some of the movies. In fact, that might even be good for us as far as the show to review some of the other Star Trek films. So I've been thinking about doing that, and I'm glad that they have this content on CBS All Access now. But I want to mention, as of yesterday, this feature was not working on the PlayStation 4 app. The movie section is still empty because there's always been that movie tab, and of course you click on it and it was empty on PlayStation 4 as of yesterday, it was still empty. They hadn't updated the app, which I think is ridiculous. You know what I mean? That they haven't updated that so that I can see the movies on my big screen. I can see them on my computer if I want to, but I don't like watching movies that way. You know what I mean? I don't like to watch movies or I could Chromecast, I guess, from my computer. But yeah, I don't understand stuff like that. It's really weird. And then, had you heard the rumor reported by Midnight's Edge that Netflix is looking to acquire Viacom CBS? Have you heard about that?
No, I'd heard something. I'd heard something similar about something else, but I hadn't heard that specifically.
That's from Midnight's Edge. They're the only source that I'm familiar with that has been talking about that. But there's been a lot of rumors that Netflix is in talks to acquire CBS, Viacom CBS, because they are in bad financial shape, really, really bad financial shape.
You know, I hate to say this, but that would explain why there was no Star Trek show ready to go when Picard ended. They might have spent what they had trying to get Picard done, and then there might be production issues, with Discovery season 3, and that's what they've been working on. Discovery season 3 so long, you'd think it'd be finished by now, but it would make sense if they're having issues wrapping post production. You know what I mean? For whatever reason, it's possible. It's possible. So.
Yep, well, I would say so. It's interesting. It's something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, talking about the investing angle before, we did spend like half a second looking at Netflix, and the value of Netflix is so high. It's like, I don't ever see myself owning any Netflix stock.
But maybe look at that Viacom stock, right? I'm looking at it because Viacom stock isn't that expensive. And so that's something to consider out there. If any of you guys use eTrader or however you might acquire stocks or things like that.
Play, I hadn't thought about that.
It's because I'm thinking about it. I'm definitely thinking about getting some Viacom CBS stock, because if Netflix buys it, oh man, that stock's going to go, So.
Yeah, it will. It will. That's for sure. Interesting. So do we have anything else that we want to talk about in Streaming Wars tonight, or are we good to move on to our...
No, it looks like the Rogues Gallery is ready to go, because they say,
Rogues,
right. Where we're going, we don't need roads. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's from Bonnie 2006. And that's actually from Twitch. That's the first time we've had a Twitch comment. Bonnie, hello. That's the first. That's actually from Twitch. That's awesome.
Very cool. So I guess if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and we'll segue over. Got the graphic up here. So, okay, here we go, folks. This is going to be our retro review segment. So basically on every episode of the Retro Rogues, we start to show off by talking about something that's contemporary and happening right now. We do our pop culture, our Streaming Wars news segment, and then we kind of go back in time. Let me use that. We're going to go back in time, and we talk about an older film or an older television show or something that we love that we want to talk about, and we give it the retrospective review treatment. So in the retrospective review treatment, which originally this version of this show used to exist, it was just called the retrospective. In the studio retrospective. Anyhow, what we do is we talk about how we first heard about the film. We talk about how we felt about the film back in the day when we originally saw it. And then we talk about how we feel about the film today, having recently rewatched it. So tell me, Eric, how did you first learn about Back to the Future? Now, let me just let me set it up real quick before we get into that. Back to the Future is from 1985. And this quick summary is Marty McFly, a 17-year-old high school student, is accidentally sent 30 years into the past in a time-traveling DeLorean invented by his close friend, the eccentric scientist, Doc Brown. Of course, in the cast, you have Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Crispin Glover, Thomas F. Wilson, and Mark McClure. Just a really, really great cast. This is directed by Robert Zemeckis and I have a little bit more I want to talk about Robert Zemeckis actually once we get into the how we feel about the film today. So tell me, Eric, how did you first hear about Back to the Future?
Well, it's kind of funny because when this film first came out, I was pretty young, and I didn't get the opportunity to see it in the theater. I don't know if it was because I wasn't interested in it or my parents didn't want to take me. I'm not exactly sure why we didn't go see this in the theater because, as I mentioned before, I was a big Michael J. Fox fan, and my family, we grew up watching Family Ties and things like that. We grew up watching Taxi, so we were very familiar with both these actors. I did see Star Trek 3 in the theater as a child, and Christopher Lloyd, of course, was in that. But for some reason, I didn't see Back to the Future in the theater. And I was way behind the curve. I was almost ostracized, you know what I mean? Because so many of the kids had seen this movie and they loved it. They kept talking about, the scene with the skateboard, where he's using the cars while he's on the skateboard and stuff like that. That was actually kind of there was a lot of buzz about that because, I think even some parent groups were like, that's unsafe, blah, blah, blah. But I hadn't seen the movie, so I didn't really know what was going on. And I remember my best friend at the time, he was obsessed with the soundtrack. And he had the soundtrack. He would play it all the time because this is an excellent soundtrack on this film. And he was obsessed with the movie. He talked about it all the time. And I hadn't seen it. I was way behind the curve. So finally, I got to see it when it came out on videotape. And in fact, I think we still had a beta back then, so we had to even wait longer, I think, to get the film, because beta was always like so much longer than getting it on a VHS. So my first experience watching it was at home via video. What about you, Dave?
Well, I actually have a similar story. The first time I saw Back to the Future was actually on VHS. I've talked before about how my family had these, they would get together with another family and we would have like movie nights, and they would get like a pizza or something or whatever. It would typically happen on a Friday night, and they would rent either 2 or 3 movies on VHS, and then we would just watch those. And that was how I saw Back to the Future. This is one of those few classic 80s movies that I did not see in the theater. It's so weird because I saw some of those.
That's funny. That's really funny because neither of us, because we didn't talk about this off the air. That's funny that neither one of us saw this in the theater.
Yeah, and it's one of the few that I didn't. I mean, I remember seeing so many of those classic 80s movies in the theater. The 2 classic 80s movies I didn't see in the theater specifically that I always think about is this and Breakfast Club. I didn't see either one of those in the theater of what I consider the holy grail, list of classic 80s.
I didn't see Breakfast Club in the theater either. Now, Bonnie mentions, did you know that Eric Stoltz was the original casting for Marty? And actually, I did know that. Did you know that as well? That Eric Stoltz was the originally cast as Marty?
Yes, I did. I was going to mention actually too that there's they talk about that a little bit. There's a really great documentary film called Back in Time. For example, we'd like to talk about our quarantine stream special where you can watch fun things basically for free. You can actually watch unless something's changed. You were able to watch the Back in Time documentary actually on Tubi.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds like an interesting one.
I've seen this the Back in Time documentary on a lot of different services. I originally saw it actually on Netflix. So I was familiar that Eric Stoltz at one point had been cast to play Marty. And I'd heard that actually before that too. Because I think back in the early days of YouTube, someone somewhere had released, because I think there's a little bit of footage of him playing Marty kind of here and there. And I'd heard Michael J. Fox, I think, talk about it once or twice too in interviews when they would ask him about Back to the Future.
And I think he filmed for like 6 weeks, so there's actually a lot of footage out there, but they just haven't released it, which I wish they would. I would actually like to see that. I would be interested in seeing that.
No, yeah, I would be too. So like I said, I saw it on VHS, just like you. That was my first introduction. I thoroughly loved the film, and I thought it was really great. This is one of those movies I regret not having the opportunity to see in the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
Harkins Theaters, which is the theater chain, one of the theater chains here in Arizona near my house. They sometimes do like these. Well, they had been. They're not doing it right now because everything's still kind of shut down. But they had been doing sort of these movie nights where they would show kind of older films. So so for example, you didn't get a chance to see. For example, I love Die Hard. I did not see Die Hard in the movie theater, but I got to see Die Hard in the movie theater around Christmas time because they did it as a part of this Tuesday. I forget what they call it. It's like Retro View or whatever it is. And so I've been meaning to try and catch Back to the Future that way, so I could at least say I've actually seen it in a movie theater.
Yeah, I don't think I ever have. I don't think I've ever seen Back to the Future in a theater. And Bonnie in the Rogues Gallery mentions the first time, since the first time I saw this was with my mom on my 8th birthday, and I fell in love with the trilogy. So there's someone who saw it as a youngster. And I think that's around the age I was when it came out. But again, I didn't get to see it when it first came out.
No, but it was a great film. I remember being completely blown away by it, and loving the film. And then back in the day, they used to have those. They had the CBS clubs, where you could sign up and you could get like the Star Trek movies on VHS, and they'd send you like one a month or something like that. And then they had the music versions where you get cassette tapes and whatever. And then they also had the VHS clubs. And the VHS clubs, they'd have the premiere selection that month, and they'd send you some initially, just like with the cassette, sign up for $1 or purchase one and get 6. Well, however that stuff, you know what I'm talking about.
We did one of those when I was a kid. That's how we got RoboCop. We were doing one of those clubs. My
mom and I did that. And we did that with one of the VHS ones. I think it was CBS, but it might have been something else. But we actually did that. And so we all picked these different movies. And my mom picked some of them, and then I picked some of them. And one of the ones that my mom picked was Back to the Future. So we actually had it in the house, and I used to watch that all the time. And then my 3 picks were Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4. Those are my 3 choices.
Nice. The trilogy, the Star Trek trilogy.
Yeah, and so, those are the first VHS movies we actually owned. Back to the Future was one of the first ones.
Now, seeing that you did watch the VH version, the VHS version, what's interesting to me, and some people don't realize this, is I always thought the to be continued thing was from the beginning, but they actually didn't do the to be continued until they came out with it on videotape. In the theater, it was not to be continued, and on the version that I saw on Netflix, there is no to be continued. I always remember that. Do you remember that, Dave?
Yes, I remember the to be continued, and it just because to me, I always felt like it was always a part of it. It was always meant to continue, because that whole sequence, your kids, Marty, something's got to be done about your kids.
I love Christopher Lloyd in this. It's just his great. Whole, just the way he talks and the constant, like shaking and everything. Bobby Chambers mentioned something that I can relate to very well about seeing it today. Is that he said, Bobby Chambers says, I just showed these to my son during the quarantine. It's so fun to experience them again with fresh eyes. And I did that as well. I actually when I watched it for the show, I watched with my daughter. And it was the first time she saw it. So that wow. I can relate to that, Bobby.
I was thinking, well, we're jumping ahead in the format, but no. So, like I said, I did see it on VHS. That was the first time I'd seen it. I hadn't really heard anything about it. It was just one of those movies we watched one night as a part of the family movie night kind of thing. No, this is such a great film. So we just talked about how we, first heard about the film. Obviously, we both quite enjoyed the film. So the next part of the retrospective format is we want to talk about how we feel about the film today. And I want to call out one of the comments, Bonnie, in the chat over here in the Rogues. Just so Bonnie knows, we call anyone who's in the chat, you remember the Rogues Gallery. So
that's right.
Bonnie in the Rogues Gallery over here, one of the comments she asked, she says, what is your favorite scene in the movie? That's an interesting question.
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Well, take this up here for just a little bit, and we'll get back to talking about how we feel about the film today. So tell me, Eric, because I got to think about this, and I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your favorite scene in Back to the Future?
That's such a hard one because there's so many good scenes in this. There's so many good scenes. I think the one that really sticks out to me, though, it's always stuck out to me ever since I was a kid, is the scene where where Marty dresses in the radiation suit and he puts the Walkman onto his onto his father's ears while he's sleeping, and he tells him he's Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan. I think that's probably my favorite scene. I mean, that's just, for me, that's like I'm in heaven. I've always loved Star Wars and I like Star Trek, and you know what I mean? And the fusion of that, of being Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan, that's probably my favorite scene. Plus, and I also like the thing where he uses the rock and roll to wake him up, and he tells him he's going to, melt his brain and all that stuff. So, I love that scene. What about you, Dave?
That is, because that's the thing. I was hoping I could figure something out by the time you got back to me. I can tell you several of the scenes that stick out in my mind that when I think of Back to the Future, I always think of. The first one is the scene where the Libyans killed Doc Brown. Not because but that's one of those scenes. That's what
it's hard to watch even today.
Yeah,
even today. And I watched it with my daughter, and I was really curious how she was going to react to that, because that's a pretty intense scene.
Yeah. Now, that's not a favorite scene, but when I think of Back to the Future, that scene always comes to me because that's what sets everything kind of in motion. I love the scene where Marty actually hits Biff when they're in the diner.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Starts the chase where he's on the skateboard through the town square. I love that scene.
Where he invents the skateboard?
Yes.
He invents the skateboard?
Yeah. That's a great scene. And then the next two actually happen during the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. The first one is, I love that scene where Marty's dad, with George McFly, where he finds the resolve and he knocks out Biff.
Oh, I love that scene. That's such a satisfying scene. It's so satisfying.
Kind of turn, and you see him make that fist, and he lays him out. That is such a great. I love that scene where you see that turn, and it just happens. And then I love
changes the whole course of his life, changes his destiny. You know what I mean?
And then I love the stuff at the dance where Marty McFly is playing for the group, the kids at the dance. He does the Johnny Be Good song and all that. I love that scene too. And I just remember as a kid, because you kind of see him doing a little bit at the beginning, but you don't realize how good he is. But as he kind of goes off script and kind of gets a little bit more, heavy rock and roll, maybe a little bit more, metal or whatever.
Heavy metal. That was totally metal. Yeah.
And then all the guys are just standing there going, and they're like rocking out. I'm like, what is this guy? What is he doing? And he kicks over the amplifier and everything and all that. And it's like, you guys are maybe not ready for that, but your kids are gonna love it. I love that whole scene.
That's a great scene. And Bobby Chambers agrees with you. He says, always love the guitar scene.
What's interesting is when I think about Back to the Future, the DeLorean is one of those classic science fiction vehicles for me. I mean, I put it in the same esteem as like the Batmobile, and that's a big deal for me, as big of a Batman fan as I am. But when I was thinking back on the things I think about when I think about the movie, the DeLorean's always there, but I'm surprised that when I'm trying to think of my favorite scene for the movie, it doesn't directly relate to the DeLorean. It's all character stuff. It's all story driven. It's character stuff. And that's what makes this movie so great. So we'll go ahead and we'll segue here into talking about how.
Well, I did want to mention, because you about that DeLorean scene, rewatching it, that scene when Marty first sees the time machine, and the delivery is just so good by Michael J. Fox. He's like, "You made a time machine?" out of a DeLorean. You know what I mean? Like the delivery. It's all about the delivery of that line.
Yeah.
Because Michael J. Fox does such a good job with that very casual line. But I just remember that stuck out in my head when you're talking about the DeLorean.
Right. That is such a great and all that's yes, film is full of so much great stuff. Because I was thinking back in the radiation suit, and I love that scene at the beginning with old, always talking about old man Peabody had this obsession about pine trees or whatever.
This crazy idea about breeding pine trees.
Yeah. Old man Peabody owned all this. And then they have that scene where when he travels back in time and he crashes into the barn, and to them it looks like a UFO.
Right.
And he comes out of the barn and he's like, sorry about your barn. And the little kid's like, he's already mutated into human form. And that whole thing is just really great too. We want to, yes, I was going to talk about that. My mom just brought up the fact that we rode in the DeLorean at Universal. I got my picture with Doc Brown too, but we're going to get into that. We want to talk about how we feel about the film today, having just recently rewatched it. Then we'll take some more comments from the Rogues Gallery and kind of go from there. But tell me, Eric, having actually recently rewatched the film, how do you feel about Back to the Future today?
Oh, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this film. I mean, this film was a classic for a reason. It's an absolute classic. As we were just talking about, there are so many good scenes. I mean, just one after another. I don't think there's one bad scene in this film. I mean, there. And what's really interesting too, watching it again, I didn't realize how much information they cram into like the first 10 minutes of this movie, because there's so much stuff that they tell you in the beginning of the movie that's so important to remember later in the movie, and it's just jam packed with stuff. And I just think the writing is excellent, the pacing's excellent, the performances are excellent. It's just as good as I remember, and it has been a while since I've seen this film because I do not own it. I do not own this film, but I mean, I like I said, it's a classic for a reason. How about you, Dave? How do you feel about the film today?
I can't possibly recommend this film enough. I wind up having Back to the Future on at least once or twice a year. I always seem to be kind of, when I talk to people about movies they love, we always end up talking about Back to the Future. Having just recently revisited it, I was thoroughly amazed, kind of looking at it from a little bit more technical standpoint, how incredibly well structured the script is. You just brought it up, Eric, how everything pays off. They set it up, they pay it off. And there's some things I noticed this time I'd never noticed before. When they show you the scene of Doc Brown's lab, and you see all the clocks and everything and all that, they don't make a big production out of it, but you see the video camera sitting on the bed, and then when he talks to Marty on the phone, he's like, "Hey, I forgot my video camera. Could you grab it and bring it?" And so they even set up something like that they didn't need to show us that. They didn't have to show us that. But it's interesting that it's so well structured, and in a sense, it reminds me for me anyway, another classic '80s movie, which is Karate Kid. Karate Kid does that too. Karate Kid sets everything up and then pays it off.
Right.
There's not a lot of, everything that happens is important to the story. Nothing is just unimportant. Everything is building. Everything is building. From the logo of the mall, when they show you the Twin Pines Mall, they pay that off with the Old Man Peabody bit, and there's the two pine trees, and this all of this stuff. It's just amazing how well structured the script is and how tight the storytelling is. And I was going to mention this because I pulled something up on my phone, and it's interesting because when people talk about those great directors from the '80s, I always hear people talking about Steven Spielberg. Everybody talks about Steven Spielberg, one of the greatest, obviously, directors of a generation. But it's interesting for me because everybody talks about Robert Zemeckis' films, and people talk about Robert Zemeckis. But I'm always surprised that more people don't bring up just the sheer number of amazing films that he's done. And what I mean by that is I don't think he gets the same kind of credit sometimes that I think Steven Spielberg gets. And it's so crazy to me when you look at the films that he's done. He's had so many great films. I mean, do you feel like that way too, Eric, or is that just me?
Well, I think he certainly is overshadowed by Steven Spielberg. I don't think there's any denying that. I consider him a great director, on the same level as Spielberg and some of the other greats. But yeah, he's definitely overshadowed by someone like Steven Spielberg, I would say.
Yeah, because my wife and I, they've been doing. Remember, I talked before about they should go back to doing the Sunday night movie kind of idea. Well, CBS has started doing that. So on CBS All Access, I think as well as their regular television channel, on Sunday night they're doing the CBS Sunday night movies. They did Raiders, and then one night they did Forrest Gump, and we actually had Forrest Gump on, and we watched it. And I had honestly forgotten that was even a Robert Zemeckis film.
Yeah.
He's just had a lot of really great films, and I'm kind of surprised. And this film doesn't just hold up in terms of the writing, doesn't just hold up in terms of the directing. I also want to talk just briefly about the score by Alan Silvestri. The score for this movie is so great. It is really great. I'd have to say, in my opinion, it's one of Alan Silvestri's greatest scores. But man, just the music in this is great. The score is great. Of course, all the pop songs that come out of it. Of course, Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News is a great. So, I mean, that's the thing. There's so many great classic things in this movie, and it encapsulates the 80s in such a truly unique way, too. It's just a great film. I can't recommend Back to the Future.
Like I mentioned, my best friend at the time, and this is in my childhood, I mean, he was obsessed with the soundtrack. Absolutely obsessed with it. He played it all the time. Absolutely obsessed with it.
Yeah. I could see that. And it's just a great film. And it's amazing that we're still talking about it and still celebrating it. But no, yeah, I would highly, highly recommend the film today. So I think we're kind of on the same page. We're highly recommending the film today.
Oh, indeed. And a lot of our gallery has some interesting ideas as well. So Bonnie says, I have a theory. So you all know the Lone Pine Mall scene, right? So he sees himself go back. So the first time he went to 1955, there was a Marty already watching. So what if we are not watching the first Marty? What if we are watching the Marty who made the best outcome? If I understand your theory there correctly, Bonnie, that's kind of interesting. And I think actually some of the other films kind of get into that because we have some scenes where like it gets really weird in like the second and third films where we kind of have Marty eventually does go back and he's actually like watching himself from the first time he went back. So there's a lot of weird stuff like that, and it gets really confusing. It can actually kind of make you go cross-eyed if you think about it too much, in my opinion. So that's kind of interesting. And Bobby mentions it holds up well with it being sort of a period piece. I think it always will, and I think that's a very good take on it, Bobby.
Well, the thing that's interesting is with the theme of the film being time travel and it being set in the 80s and representing the 80s so well because that's the period in which it was made, but also, too, representing and showcasing, the 50s so well, too. It's a really interesting way, I think, for later generations to kind of get a sense for what, the 80s and the 50s kind of sort of were like, It's a popular, it's a great movie, but they get a sense for their kind of those decades too at the same time. And in a sense, I think that's one of the amazing things that the film does. And I hope that that's, you know, one of the ways that the film continues to exist and live. Because I was thinking back on those days back in the 80s when I first saw it on VHS, and remembering how big like the whole skateboarding thing and everything was. I mean, it even affected me, you know, and I was never much.
There's a lot of people that bought skateboards because of this movie.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that bought. I was there. I remember what an effect it had on kids who went out and bought skateboards because of this movie.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's just it represents that moment in time so well, because it was, you know, it was topical. You know, it's so different trying to create a film today and have it be relevant to the 80s versus a film like this that was made in that era, and it represents it so well.
Bonnie has a sort of contrast here, because Bonnie says, I feel the scenes are outdated but still terrific, and then mentions the scene where Marty almost disappears is very ahead of its time.
Well, I could see what you're saying by some of the scenes feeling outdated, just in the context of, I was thinking about how there are things that are important to the storytelling that you have to kind of understand, that I think we're eventually getting to a point that a generation of people may not be able to relate to it anymore. I think the previous episode I talked about that idea, commonality in fiction, or commonality in understanding, you know what I mean? So that people understand certain things, and how it can resonate, and you can kind of lean on it without having to really explain it too much. And this film benefits from that. You know, the more commonality of experience, you know, the more you get invested in the story. But on the flip side, I could see where pretty soon, you know, we're going to have a generation of kids, if they discover this movie and they come to it, I think they'll still be taken with Michael J. Fox's performance. I still think they'll be taken with Christopher Lloyd. I think they'll still want to come along with the ride. They'll still want to see Biff get his, you know, comeuppance in the end. But at the same point, I think there will be things that will be a little lost on them, because there's just certain things that are important in this film that were very important and topical at the time in terms of just what life in the 80s was like, that I think certain people just won't be able to, you know, kind of sort of relate. So I can see that. I wouldn't say it's outdated myself personally, in my opinion, but I could see where eventually there's aspects of this film that people may not be familiar enough with what it was like in those days to connect with it, I think, on quite the same level. For example, that Eric and you know, we connected with it because we were alive in those days, and we know what it was like. So,
but I wasn't alive in the 50s, and I actually think I might like the 50s stuff more than the 80s, and that's as someone who grew up in the 80s and looks fondly at the 80s. I will say that my daughter loved it, and she didn't have any trouble understanding anything, you know, as far as that goes. And you know, my daughter's very young, and she enjoyed it.
Well, very cool, very cool. Then perhaps I am seeing something that isn't there. Would be the first time. I won't be the last. Probably won't be the last. So, but no, yeah, I personally can't recommend Back to the Future enough. To me, this is a classic film, you know, that comes from the 80s. It is very much a classic film. It was weird because someone had recently unveiled, I can't remember who it was, but someone had unveiled that they're attempting to do a new DeLorean. And once they unveiled that, all these rumors of a reboot movie with Tom Holland as Marty McFly and all this other stuff. And all I can think of is I don't want that. No
reboot. No. I would like a sequel, which apparently there's not much interest in as far as the creators of this film. But I would love to see like a sequel, like it could be Marty's son or something like that, something very obvious. You go with some of the premises of the cartoons. The cartoons were about Doc Brown's kids. You know, I don't know if you ever watched the cartoons, but you could do something like that. You know, but But I don't want a reboot. I wouldn't mind a sequel, but I don't want a reboot. And
I was going to say there is a little bit of a sequel of sorts. The Back to the Future ride at Universal. I don't know if the Back to the Future ride at Universal still exists or not. But when I did the Back to the Ride Future, and my mom was there, that was one of the few motion control rides that actually terrified me a little bit. Because you do a lot of time hopping in the DeLorean in the ride portion of it. And it's interesting because they give you a totally new kind of storyline that happens. Like while you're waiting in line, you're seeing things kind of occur. And Biff is breaking into basically what is sort of like a time institute that Dr. Brown has founded. And he has all these different DeLorean time machines. And it's a whole big, huge thing. It was very interesting. So I think that this franchise still has lots of potential. If they move the story forward, either we learn more about, Doc Brown's kids that we get at the end of Back to the Future, part 3, or if they want to do something along those lines, I would be interested to explore, obviously, this world and everything. Yeah. Excuse me. But no, yeah, it's I would like to see kind of like what they did with the Cobra Kai, where it's a continuation.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be totally down for a continuation. Bring some of the original people back if it works. You know what I mean, within the context of what they're trying to do. But I don't know if I want to reboot, because I feel like that once you recast these characters and you move some things around, it's just not the same thing anymore.
No reboot. No, yeah. I say no. And we got some clarification from Bonnie saying that, like, I don't understand why he wears a life jacket. That is a good example of something that is dated in this. And I wondered about what my daughter was thinking watching that, because these vests are not popular anymore. You know what I mean? And in the 50s, people are like, you're wearing a life preserver, because they don't understand it. And I think a lot of people today wouldn't understand it. What about you, Dave, as far as the whole vest issue? Because that is something that is kind of, I wondered about that with my daughter. I didn't ask her, but I wondered, like, do you know what that is? I mean, does that resonate with you? Because that's not popular anymore.
Well, number one, it is a jacket. Back in the 80s, they used to make these. They did come with sleeves. I didn't have the exact one that Marty McFly has, but I did have one similar to it. And basically it had a zipper in the shoulder, and you could basically unzip this thing and take the sleeves off.
My friend gave me one. The friend I was talking about, who saw the movie before me and was obsessed with the soundtrack and everything. He had a spare ski jacket, the type you're talking about, and he gave it to me because he was obviously into it, I think, because of the movie.
Yeah. It was a fad. It was the thing that was big for a little while. I'll be honest with you, I had one of those, and I took the sleeves off, the sleeves back on, not because I thought it was cool, just because I just never did. It was just when you're layering, because if you look at the way he's dressed, he's layering. That's basically what he's doing, because he's got a shirt on under the one shirt, and he's got the jean jacket, and he's got that on top of the jean jacket. So he's trying to layer. So as the day gets warmer, he can take some of these layers off. Of course, over the course of the film, there's at no point that he feels like he needs to take any of these layers off, because it's also a costume and an outfit he's wearing in a movie. But ideally, that's what you would do. Like when I was in the Scouts, because I used to be a Boy Scout. I'm actually an Eagle Scout. When I used to be in the Scouts, you would do the same thing. You would layer at the beginning of the day when it was colder, and as you would hike, you would just start taking different pieces and stuff and whatever off. So you might start the day basically dressed for a winter hike, and by the time that you wind up and you get back to camp, you're in your summer outfit and you're sweating. You know what I mean? You got your shorts on and just a t-shirt, and you're all the way down to a Class B summer uniform by the time you get back to camp. That's pretty common. But I could see that maybe for a generation, a younger generation coming to this film now, again, as I'm talking about commonality of experience, you're so far removed from it, it probably doesn't make any sense, and it may look to you like it is a life preserver and not a jacket. So there you go. But yeah, they used to make these jackets, and they had zippers in the sleeves, and you could unzip the thing and take the sleeve off. I never put the sleeves back on. And that was the thing too. There was just that insulated winter vest. That was like a thing too. I remember at one point when I was younger, my mom used to get me these crazy snow outfits. Mom, don't you dare post one of those pictures where I talk about this. But she used to get these weird snow outfits that kind of reminiscent of a Toy Story where the kid's in the thing and he can't put his arms down. And there was one that she got me one time, and it actually had a vest that you put on first. And like the pants and the top are connected, and there was a vest with it. So it was almost like a suit, like a 3-piece suit, but it was like for winter, like out in the snow. Because when I used to play Star Wars and I'd be Han Solo, that was the vest I would wear because it was darkly colored and it looked kind of sci-fi-ish. And it wasn't as thick as the rest of it. It was a little bit thinner. So running around with my pretend Star Wars blaster and my vest. I don't know.
And Jane corrected you. You're talking about Christmas Story. That was a scene from Christmas Story.
What did I say?
Toy Story.
Toy Story. Yes, Christmas Story is what not Toy Story. So yeah, the vest was just like a thing. I don't know. I think a whole generation is not going to understand that soon enough. That's what I'm talking about. It doesn't make any sense to some people now. So
no, that's dated. That's definitely dated. There's no denying that's dated. So
yeah. But again, that's why I think too it kind of represents that era, kind of in a pure sense, because that was the thing that was going on then, and it's represented in the film, so it represents the era very well. And if it doesn't make any sense to you now, in hindsight, it doesn't make any sense to me now either. But it was just something that you did. I don't know. Thing. So, and again, I didn't do it because it's fashionable. I did it because I wanted to stay warm and I was trying to layer. And it was a way to layer without getting too super mega hot. So there you go. Do you have anything else you want to add, Eric, in relation to
I can't recommend this film enough. As I mentioned, it's timeless, it's ageless. My young daughter liked it. I like it. I think all ages liked it. My father liked these films. In fact, we saw the next two parts in the theater together. When Father took me to go see those movies, Back to the Future 2 and 3, and we loved them. So I think it's timeless in the sense that it's just incredibly entertaining, and all generations can enjoy it.
For sure. So are we good with that? Are we ready to go to the outro?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. So I want to thank you for hopefully watching or listening to this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. If you're curious to see some of the more of my artwork, if you're curious to learn more about me, as well as, again, find additional information about the Retro Rogues show, you can find all of that and so much more at my website, which is at www.davebeatty.com. That's www.davebeatty.com. And I want to thank my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks, hopefully watching or listening at home, where they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
I'm always most active on Twitter, so that's the place that you can find me the easiest. You can see my Twitter handle there. It's BassGod14, BASSGOD14. My DMs are always open. I'm always open to suggestions that folks have about the show or anything like that. BassGod14 is also my YouTube channel. It's also my Twitch. And speaking of which, we had our first time that we had a Twitch viewer, and Bonnie quoted the movie and said, "Marty, you've got to come back with me." Where? Back to the Future. And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.